Chapter 396. No one knew Alusha better than Noah. This wasn't an exaggeration, but the truth. Although Noah had left Fairy Tale for quite some time, Alusha was the first friend of the same age that Noah had met in Fairy Tale apart from Grey. They were also childhood sweethearts who had grown up together. And to Alusha, Noah was the first person she had truly opened her heart to after joining Fairy Tale. She had once said that it was Noah who had saved her, so it was obvious how close the two of them were. The Alusha that Noah knew was the kind of person who looked strong on the outside but was equally strong on the inside. Although she had weaknesses, she definitely wouldn't run away from this weakness. She treated her companions better than herself and treated the people around her more important than herself. She was a truly selfless and heroic Valkyrie. How could Noah not understand such a person who had grown up with him, worked with him, played with him, and even bathed with him? To say that Alusha was a traitor who would betray her companions. Let alone Noah, even the members of Fairy Tale who didn't often interact with Alusha wouldn't believe it. However, Zio's excited expression didn't look like she was lying. Furthermore, Simon, Wooly, and Mariana had lowered their heads in silence. The atmosphere made Noah unable to tell that they were acting at all. With the contradiction between the two, Noah couldn't ignore Zio's words. "What's going on?" Noah's voice more or less turned cold. "Speak clearly. We have nothing to say to you." Zio seemed to have recovered some of her strength. She stood up and held a few poker cards in her hand as she smiled sinisterly. "After we lock you in the dungeon and capture Sister, we will give you plenty of time to reunite. When the time comes, you can ask her properly." "Hi, Simon." Almost at the same moment Zio finished her sentence, Wooly shouted. "Aren't you going to put on a magnificent show?" The burly man named Simon suddenly took a step forward, and a considerable amount of magic power gushed out from his body. A magic formation spun and spread out from under his feet, instantly covering the entire ground. Darkness instant dash. It was as if something had suddenly spread to the surroundings, and Noah's field of vision was suddenly lost. The thing that spread out was darkness. Just as the word said, all the light in the entire space disappeared without a trace in a moment, causing the surroundings to become extremely dark. Not to mention seeing far away, one couldn't even see one's own hands. It was truly a case of not being able to see 5 fingers if one stretched out one's hand. Because Noah was strengthened by the protozoan virus, his night vision was better than that of an owl under the enhancement of various species' DNA. However, when the darkness spread, Noah still lost all of his vision and couldn't see anything. The reason was simple. The darkness wasn't night in the true sense, but a region without light created by magic. Noah's current situation was as if he had sunk into a swamp. No matter how good his night vision was, he couldn't see the swamp that was filled with mud. Faced with this situation, Noah was surprisingly calm. "That is to say, if I don't subdue you, you won't say anything, right?" "Huh? Are you sure you're not mistaken?" Zio's voice sounded from all directions and entered Noah's ears. "The one who should be subdued should be you." With that, a sharp sound of something breaking through the air sounded from behind Noah. In the darkness that Noah couldn't see, Wooly's body, who was in an exaggerated posture, disintegrated into square blocks that resembled building blocks. Like cannonballs, they went against the strong wind and broke through the air, enveloping Noah like a curtain of rain. Bang! Unfortunately, before the cannonball-like blocks could land on Noah's body, a burst of violent magic turned into a storm. With Noah as the center, it suddenly surged and attacked in all directions. Dong! It was as if they had crashed into a solid wall. When the rain-like cubes that were flying towards Noah collided with the storm that was formed by the magic power, all of them were sent flying backwards. At a speed faster than when they came, they landed on the head of Wooly, who was left with only his head left. Bang! The sound of the collision sounded. Go! Wooly let out a muffled groan. His head was instantly smashed by the various parts of his body that had turned into blocks. Like a smashed wall, his head fell to the ground. Wadash! The surrounding darkness didn't seem to affect Simon's companions. Seeing Wooly being defeated in one blow, Simon let out a cry of disbelief. He actually used magic to reflect magic. Can that kind of thing be done? Miliana was at a loss. Damn it! You monster! Even Zio seemed to be in disbelief as she roared at Noah. She grabbed the poker cards in her hand and threw them out. Ding, 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 ding. Amidst the crisp sounds, all the poker cards that Zio had thrown out turned into rays of light. They flashed through the air and shot out explosively. Paw! This time, Noah did not choose to waste a large amount of mana to reflect the spells that were targeted at him. Instead, he stomped on the ground forcefully, causing the ground to crack. At the same time, his body spun like a top and bounced off in another direction. Ding, 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 ding. The poker cards that had turned into rays of light fell to the ground. The sharp corners of the cards pierced into the ground before dissipating and returning to their original appearance. At this moment, Noah, who had spun like a top, flew past like a ghost and charged in Zio's direction. Wooly! Miliana! Realizing that she couldn't react to Noah's speed at all, Zio shouted anxiously. Cat binding! Miliana, who had reacted, hurriedly raised her hand towards Noah. During the spurt of magic, a flexible tube-like rope spiraled up like a whip like a tornado, rubbing against the air and shooting in Noah's direction. Polygon attack! Wooly, who had poked his head out of the fragments of his body, didn't put on airs anymore. He activated all the magic in his body, causing the cubes to float up again and fly out like bullets, shooting out rapidly. Ha! Simon, who had been maintaining the magic called Dark Moment, was even more straightforward. He charged directly in Zio's direction, or more accurately, in Noah's direction. He raised his fist and swung it at Noah. With a gust of wind, he smashed it fiercely at Noah. Come on! Even Zio seemed to be in a frenzy. She held a poker card between her fingers and charged forward instead of retreating. Suddenly, Noah had Zio charging at him from the front. Behind him was Miliana's whip-like attack. On his left was Simon, who was charging at him like an iron tower. On his right was blocks that resembled cannonballs. There were attacks from the front, back, left, and right. Facing this situation, Noah smiled coldly. He stretched out his finger, and his magic followed the trajectory of his finger and wrote a rune in the air, tick. That was the magic spell that had defeated all of the Phantom Lord's magic shooters in a single strike. Boom! With Noah as the center, a magnificent shock wave stirred up like an explosion. It spread in all directions, stirring up smoke and dust. Paw 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 paw. At this moment, regardless of whether it was the poker cards, ropes, cubes, or fists, they were all blown away by the violent shock wave. Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana only had time to cry out in alarm before they were all drowned by the shock wave. Boom! A corner of the Paradise Tower that stood on the sea once again exploded, causing the thick smoke that had begun to dissipate to rise and fill the sky once again. The soldiers in the Paradise Tower were finally alarmed. They rushed over amidst the commotion. The commotion was still ongoing. Chapter 397. Gravel continued to roll back and forth from the surrounding walls and the ground, causing a series of crisp sounds to ring out. Thick smoke and dust covered the surroundings and spread towards a hole that led to the outside that had appeared at some point in time. It was exposed to the sunlight outside and rose along the Paradise Tower, blowing towards the sky. Noah, who was standing in the tunnel that was in a sorry state as if it had been attacked by an explosion, patted the clothes that stuck to his body and flicked the dust away. Then, he looked around. Og, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana were lying on the ground in front, behind, left, and right of Noah. Their bodies were dirty, and they were moaning in pain as they struggled to move their bodies. From the outside, the four of them didn't seem to have suffered any obvious external injuries. It was mainly because their bodies had suffered an impact. Now, their bodies were in a state similar to numbness and pain, making it difficult for them to stand up. Seeing this, Noah frowned. Did I hit them too hard? How can I ask questions like this? Just as he said this, there was a commotion on the other side of the tunnel. Over there. The explosion just now came from there. Quick. Let's go and take a look. Let's go and take a look. Along with this voice, a series of messy footsteps came without any rhythm, causing Noah's frown to deepen. Looking at Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana lying on the ground and still struggling to move their bodies, Noah pondered for a while and sighed. Forget it, let's wait until we get to the bottom of this before taking action. With that said, Noah was just about to walk towards Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana when his footsteps suddenly stopped. He frowned again, raised his head, and looked up. Noah stared at the ceiling that was only made of stone. All of a sudden, he smiled. I see. Have I been discovered? After saying this, Noah retracted his gaze as if nothing had happened. Therefore, when all the soldiers gathered here arrived at the scene, it wasn't just Noah. Even Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana had disappeared, leaving the soldiers with a disheveled and messy scene. On the top floor of the Paradise Tower, Jalal, who was sitting in a throne-like position, looked at the crystal ball on his armrest and met Noah's eyes, who suddenly raised his head and looked at him in the crystal ball. Looking at Noah, who smiled on the crystal ball and retracted his gaze before taking Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana away, Jalal reached out his hand and touched the crystal ball. The image on it instantly disappeared. Sure enough, a guy who can control a gold-tier beast like that can't be a simple person. To be able to defeat Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana so easily, plus that gold-tier beast, it seems like I'm in some danger. Jalal showed a rare troubled expression as he hesitated. Do I have to call him back? This idea was rejected by Jalal as soon as it came to his mind. There are more important plans over there. I can't give up because of an accident. Let's see how things go. This was an empty room in the Paradise Tower. The room seemed to belong to ordinary soldiers. Not only were there no decorations, but there were also many beds arranged in a row. Obviously, this room didn't belong to anyone. Instead, it was like a dormitory, a large room where a large number of soldiers lived. Bang! In such a room, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana were tied up with thick ropes from who knew where, and were violently thrown to the ground with their butts touching the ground. It hurts. Miliana felt that her buttocks didn't belong to her anymore. Tears welled up in her eyes. Damn it. Zio also felt the pain, but like a rebellious teenager, she struggled regardless of the situation. Let me go. No. Even Wooly cried out in alarm. His voice actually carried a hint of despair. This isn't gorgeous at all. It's not cool at all. Simon was the only one who sat there obediently. He just kept looking at Noah, his eyes flashing. After the battle just now, although the four of them didn't suffer any obvious injuries, they had basically used up all of their magic power and were in a state where they couldn't use magic. And magic power was equivalent to life force. In a situation where their magic power was depleted to the point where they couldn't even use magic, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana felt weak all over. Except for Zio, no one wanted to waste their strength and struggle. Therefore, instead of doing something useless, it was better to buy time to recover their magic power. In that case, an ordinary rope wouldn't be able to trap them. Simon understood this, Miliana understood this, and even Wooly, who had been making a ruckus, understood this, so they didn't do anything. Only Zio seemed to be unable to accept the fact that she had lost, or rather, she was really unwilling to accept it and kept struggling. Looking at the four of them, Noah looked down at them in a condescending manner, his voice without the slightest bit of emotion. "Speak. Why did you say that Alusha betrayed you?" Zio glared fiercely at Noah, and even Miliana pouted angrily, ignoring Noah's question. "Hi, boy. Don't you know that negotiations are usually about mutual compromise?" Wooly responded to Noah, but he was like the male lead of a movie who was deliberately acting cool, revealing a smile that he thought was very handsome. "Let us go first, then we can consider answering you. How about it? Is that so?" Noah smiled, and his smile made the four captives feel a chill in their hearts. "In other words, if I don't torture you, you won't answer my questions obediently, right?" Torture. Zio, Wooly, and Miliana were shocked, and their faces were filled with fear. As slaves in the Tower of Paradise, which was still under the rule of the magic order that believed in black magic, Miliana and the others must have been tortured a lot back then. Now, after 8 years, they encountered such a situation again. It must have made them recall what happened back then, which was why they were afraid, right? Simon, who was the only one who remained silent, sighed and looked up at Noah. "Alusha was once a slave in this tower, just like us." Hearing that, Noah's face sank. "Indeed, Alusha was once a slave here." "Simon!" Zio yelled. "That's enough, Zio," Simon said to Zio expressionlessly. "There's nothing to hide, is there?" Zio immediately gritted her teeth, snorted, and turned her head away. "Now, those who are still in this tower are slaves who were captured by the magic order from other places 8 years ago," Simon said in a deep voice. "It's the same for Alusha. She was captured by the magic order, and we met at that time." With Simon's recount, Noah finally learned of Alusha's unbearable past. Alusha, Zio, Simon, Wooly, Miliana, and the others were captured by the magic order that believed in black magic. They were slaves who attempted to build the system through labor. It was the same for Jalal. Under the situation of not having enough to eat or sleep, and being abused from time to time, Alusha and the others had been living in this hellish place. They were used as tools and did manual labor every day. One could imagine how cruel this was to a child. However, wherever there was suppression, there would be resistance. By chance, Zio, who was still a child at the time, proposed an escape plan, but she was discovered. Zio, who was interrogated by the magic order, didn't have the courage to stand forward and admit that she was the one who proposed the plan. In the end, Alusha was captured and tortured as a scapegoat. It was at that time that Alusha lost an eye. And with that as an opportunity, the slaves in the Tower of Paradise rebelled and began to riot. Originally, the riot would have been a success because Alusha had awakened magic during this process and defeated all the magic soldiers. But at that moment, an accident happened. Zio, Simon, Wooly, Miliana, and the others, who were waiting to escape on the ship, were informed of something by Jalal, who suddenly appeared in front of them. Alusha was immersed in the power of magic and betrayed them. Chapter 398. Alusha was immersed in the power of magic. She betrayed us. Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Simon. "Is this what Jalal said?" "Yes." Simon nodded and lowered his head, as if he didn't want Noah to see his expression. Jalal said that Alusha was unable to learn the correct form of magic due to her awakening of magic during her resistance. As a result, she was devoured by the power of magic and lost herself. She went to the end of the road and abandoned everyone. Hearing Simon's words, Noah had a thoughtful look in his eyes. That Alusha was immersed in the power of magic. Fortunately, only Noah heard this sentence. Otherwise, he would definitely be laughed at by everyone who knew Alusha. As the famous fairy queen of the Fiori kingdom, if Alusha was really immersed in the power of magic and lost herself, then it would be impossible to win back this title. Noah had been training with Alusha since he was young. He saw with his own eyes that Alusha practiced her outfit-changing magic 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times a day. Moreover, every time she felt that it was not enough, she would have a determined expression and continue to work hard. Was this what a person who was immersed in the power of magic and lost herself would do? People who were immersed in the power of magic and lost their sense of self would definitely not think of working hard to train. Instead, they would be like those magic orders who believed in black magic. Every day, they would frantically search for forbidden magic like the our system and try to find a shortcut to increase their power. Therefore, when Simon said such a sentence, Noah was sure that it was false. It was not that what Simon said was false, but that the truth was not what Simon knew. At least, Noah felt that it was definitely not like that. Sister installed bombs on all the boats and blew up all the boats that we used to escape. She escaped by herself. Zio finally said with hatred. If it weren't for Jalal, we would have been blown up by the sister who abandoned us all. Wooly and Miljana also lowered their heads and fell silent in grief. Sigh. Looking at his companions, Simon sighed and turned his head away as if he couldn't bear to look at them. You said that Jalal suddenly appeared in front of you when you were planning to escape, right? Noah's deep eyes stared straight at Simon. So what was Sherard doing before that? Jalal is being held captive, Simon answered honestly. Because Zio's escape plan was exposed, Alusha was locked up in the torture chamber to be punished. In order to save Alusha, Jalal escaped alone. With that said, Simon shot a glance at Zio and saw her biting her lips tightly as she tried her best to hold back her feelings of guilt. He sighed again. We waited in the cell obediently, but in the end, what we waited for was Alusha who lost an eye. And Jalal was discovered to have gone to save Alusha and was locked up in the torture chamber to be punished in place of Alusha. Simon raised his head, his eyes shining brightly. It was at that time that Alusha decided to resist and saved all of us to fight the magic order. Little Elu at that time was really handsome. Miljana seemed to recall the scene at that time. She smiled in a daze, but her expression soon dimmed again. But even little Era was only a child at that time. She almost died. The person who saved Alusha at that time was a grandfather named Rob. Simon shook his head. Grandpa Rob used to be a very great magic shooter, but for some reason, he lost his power. In order to save Alusha, he used up all his magic power. And magic power is equivalent to life force. Wooly lowered his head and said. Grandpa Rob, who used up all his magic power, died just like that. Luobu. Noah muttered to himself. After a while, he blushed. Could it be the Rob that Grandpa knew? When Makarov was young, he had a group of close friends who had gone through life and death together. Among them, there was Polyusia, whom Noah had met when he was young, Yajma, whom he had met at the Senate not long ago, and several other leaders of famous guilds in the Fiori kingdom. Noah remembered that Makarov had also mentioned a person. It was a member of Fairy Tale, who suddenly disappeared many years ago. He was also a good friend of Makarov, Polyusia, and Yajma. That person was called Rob. Could it be that the missing Grandpa Rob was the same Grandpa Rob who was caught as a slave in the Tower of Paradise and saved Alusha's life, but lost his own life? It was because she knew that Rob was a magic shooter in Fairy Tale that Alusha joined Fairy Tale after escaping from the Tower of Paradise. You guys continue. Noah, who had sorted out everything, stared straight at Simon. And then? What happened? Later, because of Grandpa Rob's death, Alusha awakened her magic and defeated all the people from the Church of Magic. She ran off to save Jalal alone, and before that, we escaped back to the ship. Simon met Noah's gaze, and his tone became steady. During the period when Elisha went to save Jalal, we didn't know what happened. But later, Jalal suddenly appeared and told us that Elisha had installed bombs on all the ships. She abandoned all of us and escaped alone. That's how Sister was saved, by abandoning all of us. Zio gave Noah an ugly smile. You said that Sister was your companion, right? You have to be careful not to be betrayed by that traitor. Just as he said that, the sole of a shoe suddenly enlarged under Zio's gaze. Bam! Noah kicked Zio's face fiercely. Ah! Zio cried out in pain as her entire head was filled with grief. Tears, snot, and even blood flowed down from her nose. Zio! Mariana exclaimed. What are you doing? Wooly also roared angrily at Noah. Noah retracted his foot and stood up. He stared coldly at Zio and spat out this sentence. You don't have the right to call Elisha sister. What did you say? Zio was enraged, and even her expression turned ferocious. What right do you have to say that? Because you are a heartless person. Noah didn't even seem willing to look at Zio as he turned his back. Because you suggested an escape plan, but you didn't have the guts to stand forward and admit it after being discovered. Elisha took the blame for you without a word. She lost her eye completely because of you. And after deciding to resist, Elisha also acted as the vanguard. If not for Elisha awakening her magic, you wouldn't have been able to escape, much less overthrow the magical order and escape your status as a slave. What did you do to such a person, to a person you call sister? Noah turned his head and scoffed in disdain. What you did was listen to the words of others and believe them without any hesitation. You let down Elisha, who saved your life, took the blame for you, and changed your fate. You don't have the right to call Elisha sister. A person like you doesn't have the right to be Elisha's younger brother. Noah glared coldly at Zio. It wasn't Elisha who betrayed you, but you who betrayed Elisha. You're lying. Lying. Zio's face turned red as she screamed crazily. Do you mean that sister didn't betray us? Were we all deceived by Jalal? At the very least, I believe in Elisha. I believe that she's definitely not the kind of person who would betray her companions. Noah's gaze turned ruthless as he looked at Zio. And you, since you can't believe in Elisha, then you don't have the right to yell here. You're just a pitiful person who failed to live up to the kindness of others. Zio's expression changed again and again. Even Wooly and Mariana couldn't help but waver. She didn't believe in Elisha, but weren't they the same? At this moment, Noah lifted his head and looked above with a cold glint in his eyes. Let me meet this Jalal and dig out the missing part of the secret. Upon hearing Noah's words, Simon's eyes flickered again. Chapter 399. Elisha had said that 3 people had saved her in this life. Now, Noah finally knew who the 3 people were. One was Luobu, a former member of Fairy Tale who had sacrificed himself to protect Elisha from the Church of Magic. The other was Jalal, who had been a slave of the Paradise Tower 8 years ago just like Elisha. He had rescued Elisha from the torture chamber but had been punished in place of Elisha. Now, he had become the ruler of the Paradise Tower. The last was Noah, the Noah who had given Elisha a new life. To Elisha, Luobu and Noah were people who had given her a rebirth in a certain sense. And since Jalal could become a scapegoat in order to save Elisha, it was obvious that he was also one of Elisha's companions. At least, he used to be. However, in the middle, something must have happened when Elisha went to save Jalal after the end of the resistance, which ultimately led to an unexpected ending. In any case, Noah would never believe that Elisha was the kind of person who would betray her companions. Therefore, no matter how he thought about it, the problem lay with Jalal. As long as he found Jalal, then all the problems would be solved. Noah might also be able to find a way to let Alusha get rid of her unbearable past. Last question. Noah turned around and asked Simon. Where is Jalal? Upon hearing Noah's words, be it Zio, Simon, Wooly, or Mariana, they were all shocked. Boy, don't tell me you're thinking of looking for Jalal. Wooly shouted exaggeratedly. I advise you to give up. That way, you can still maintain your beauty, boy. Jalal is different from us. We can only master our magic with Jalal's help, Mariana said softly. The strongest in the Paradise Tower is Jalal, and he is very, very strong. You are definitely not his match. Although you may not be convinced by this, have you really thought it through? Simon looked straight at Noah and said in a solemn tone. Jalal is indeed very strong, which is why he was able to become the ruler of the Paradise Tower. You have to think carefully. If you lose, not only will you not get anything, but you will also have to pay a heavy price. If you have a death wish, feel free to do so, Zio said in a nasty tone. In any case, you will soon taste true despair. Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at these people with a faint smile. Are you worried about me? Aren't you with Jalal? Hearing Noah's words, Miliana's group suddenly woke up. They exchanged glances with each other and became silent. Seeing this, Noah nodded in his heart. These people were not bad in nature, but they were a little too naive and easy to be used by others. Previously, they had always listened to Jalal, so everything they did was very orderly. Now, because of Noah's words, the four of them had begun to doubt Jalal's words. Their stance suddenly became unclear, so they subconsciously advised Noah. You don't have to worry about my matters. Noah squatted down and directly untied the ropes on Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Mariana. Meow. Mariana took the lead and made a puzzled sound. What are you doing? Zio was also stunned. You are not going to let us go, are you? Seeing that you are Alusha's companions who went through thick and thin with her when she was young, and that you might be used, I won't make things difficult for you. Noah threw away the rope in his hand and pointed a finger at the space in front of him. But don't think that I will let you go so easily. After saying that, Noah's fingers suddenly slid, and magic power flowed along his finger to write faintly discernible runes in the void. Then, he flicked the runes slightly. Before Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Mariana could even react, Noah had written 4 runes. With a flick of his finger, the runes suddenly flew out and imprinted on the chests of the 4 people, then disappeared. Only then did Mariana and the other 3 react. They hurriedly touched their chests, but didn't feel anything. What is this? This is just a precaution. Noah curled his lips and smiled. If you obediently find a place to hide, or directly leave this place, then nothing will happen to you. But if you still want to continue to make things difficult for me, or even have designs on Alusha, then your bodies will be burned to a crisp in an instant. Hearing this, Mariana and the other 3 shuddered and touched their chests even more desperately, as if doing so could expel the runes hidden in their bodies. Noah didn't pay much attention to this and let them do as they pleased. Although I don't know where it is, since it is the ruler, it shouldn't be below, but above, right? Noah looked up and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. I hope we can have a pleasant meeting, Jalal. After saying that, Noah turned around and walked outside. Simon, who had remained silent from the beginning to the end, inadvertently saw the fairy tale guild emblem on the back of Noah's hand and fell into deep thought. After Noah left the room, the 4 present all stood up. This script is a bit wrong. Wooly said as if he wanted to cry but had no tears. Why does it feel like he is the protagonist? Why is he the only one who can turn around and leave so elegantly? This isn't right. That kind of thing is fine no matter what. Zio sighed and touched her chest. What we should think about now is what we should do. What that person said should be true, right? Mariana said timidly. If we continue to oppose him, his magic will burn us to death. That should be the truth. Simon nodded. So, from now on, we can no longer participate in the matter between him and Jalal. Zayo, Wooly, and Mariana were suddenly at a loss. Then what should we do? Just as Noah expected, the four of them who did not know who to believe at first were completely at a loss after losing a clear goal. Only Simon recalled Noah's words and took a deep breath. Let me make it clear first. I am the same as that person. From the beginning to the end, I believe that Elisha did not betray us. This sentence made Zayo, Wooly, and Mariana lower their heads, not knowing what to say. However, Simon's next words shocked everyone. I want to find Elisha. Find Elisha. Everyone was shocked, and Mariana hurriedly said. But that person said we can't have any ideas about little Elu. I'm not going to capture Elisha. I'm going to ask Elisha for help. Simon said calmly. I feel that that person is not simple. He should be able to deal with Jalal, but the most frightening thing about Jalal isn't his strength, but his cunning that has deceived us for 8 whole years. I'm worried that he will suffer. So, we have to find Elisha. But. Zayo gritted her teeth. Where should we find her? Hearing this, Simon recalled the guild emblem on the back of Noah's hand and said word by word. Fairy tale, Paradise Tower, top floor. This place was different from the rest of the Paradise Tower. At the very least, this place was not just made of unchanging stones. After entering the vast room on the top floor of the Paradise Tower, the first thing Noah saw was a huge crystal in the middle of the room that looked like an ice spike. Noah couldn't tell if this crystal was a magic crystal because it didn't contain any mana. Meanwhile, on the walls around the room were murals of vicious demons and humans with painful expressions. The murals made Shifeng's hair stand on end. Although you are an uninvited guest, allow me to greet you for the time being. The one who said this was the blue-haired ruler sitting on the throne, looking at Noah, who was slowly walking over with an evil look in his eyes. Welcome to my Paradise Tower, Noah Dole. Looking at Jalal, who exuded a sinister aura, Noah's eyes glowed with a frightening light. Chapter 400. Separated by a huge crystal in the middle of a vast space, Noah, who was standing at the entrance, and Jalal, who was sitting on the throne, looked at each other in the air. Although there were no obvious sparks bursting out, the atmosphere around them had completely sunk and become extremely oppressive. Noah cast his gaze at Jalal, who was sitting opposite him, and slowly walked forward while speaking indifferently. You know me. This was the first real meeting between Noah and Jalal. However, Jalal was able to call out his full name, which meant that he had some information about Noah. Jalal smiled nonchalantly and stood up from his seat. He mimicked Noah and walked forward while speaking in a playful tone. Don't you know me too? Then you should know why I'm here, right? Noah's expression remained unchanged. I don't know, sir. Do you intend to answer my question? Which purpose are you referring to? Jalal stared at Noah, who was walking towards him. Information about the Paradise Tower. Or the truth of the past. However, to Jalal's surprise, Noah actually sneered. You must be mistaken somewhere, right? Noah lifted his chin slightly and cast a cold gaze on Jalal. Information about the Paradise Tower. The truth of the past. That's not the most important thing. Whether it's investigating the Paradise Tower or the truth of what happened here in the past, it's just to serve my only purpose from the beginning to the end. Noah stopped walking, reached out his hand, and clenched it tightly in Jalal's direction. I only have one purpose, and that is to understand Elisha's unbearable past and pull her out of the mud. That's right. That was Noah's purpose. The reason why Noah came here, the reason why he came to Jalal, was not because our system would resurrect the evil black mage Gerald, nor was it because he wanted to save everyone here. He just wanted to liberate Alusha from her painful past. Other than that, there was no other purpose. And this purpose was extremely unexpected for Jalal. That really surprises me. Jalal smiled, and no matter how one looked at it, that smile seemed to be mocking Noah. I thought that you came to stop the activation of our system, and also thought that you came to save everyone here. I even thought that the mainland had discovered something and sent you here to investigate. I didn't expect that you came here just for Alusha alone. This really surprises me. Are you really surprised? Noah stared at Jalal's evil face as if he wanted to see through Jalal's mind. Didn't you also try to save Alusha in the torture chamber in the past? You knew that you would die if you were discovered, but you still risked everything to save Alusha, didn't you? Are you talking about that time? Jalal's smile became even wider. That's because I hadn't awakened at that time. Awakened? Noah's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by that? At that time, I didn't realize what a great person Gerald was. Jalal's expression became a little fanatical at the mention of the name of the greatest villain in history. It wasn't until I was imprisoned in the torture chamber in place of Alusha that I realized how great Gerald was. I realized that in order to obtain true freedom and the right to live in a real paradise, I had to resurrect Gerald. That's why I awakened and started to control everything. It's a pity that Alyssa doesn't understand at all. She doesn't know how great of a person Gerald is. She even tried to persuade me to run away with my hard-earned labor force. Jalal shook his head regretfully. Although it's a pity, since Alusha couldn't understand, then I don't need her. It just so happens that I need a reason to keep everyone here, so I'll let Alusha contribute her strength to the great Gerald. Upon hearing that, Noah raised his head abruptly. His gaze was like an arrow, shooting straight at Jalal as if he wanted to pierce through him. In other words, the so-called betrayal of Alusha was all orchestrated by you. It couldn't be helped. Everything was for Gerald. Jalal unhurriedly revealed a sinister smile. Now that the Paradise Tower is finally completed, I don't need these anymore. If you want to know the truth, I'll tell you. If you want to save Alusha's companions, I'll let you save them. All I want is Gerald's resurrection. The smile on Jalal's face disappeared as he spoke, and his expression became a little terrifying and evil. Don't get in my way, Noah Doria. The entire place fell silent. Noah looked at Jalal without any change in his expression. After a while, he opened his mouth to speak. It seems like you're the one who was devoured by the power of magic. Now, the truth about Alusha's unbearable past was completely revealed. Although they didn't know what happened, Jalal, who replaced Alusha in the torture chamber, awakened his magic for some reason and was devoured by the power of magic. He didn't know if it was his magic or someone else's, and became a complete villain. Judging from Jalal's fanaticism and cruelty for Gerald, he was simply like a fanatic who had lost his sense of self and had no trace of rationality at all. That was why in order to complete our system, Jalal deliberately let Alusha go and blew up all the escape boats so that all the slaves could only stay behind to help him build the Paradise Tower. All the bad reputation was pushed onto Alusha. Therefore, when Alyssa first joined Fairy Tale, she had that unapproachable look, and when she talked about the past, she would have such a painful expression. Jalal probably took all the people here as hostages to threaten Alusha. He didn't want Alusha to expose the matter of the Paradise Tower, or even to come close to this place. Otherwise, he would kill Alusha's former companions. Jalal, who was willing to sacrifice his own life to save Alusha, was long gone. Now, there was only an evil person who had completely lost his sense of self and was devoured by the power of magic. Thawed. Noah took a step forward. His gaze on Jalal was so cold that it pierced Jalal's bones. Is it because of you that Alusha is in so much pain? What do you want to do? Noah Doria. Jalal laughed out loud. Do you want to defeat me? Do you want to stop me? Do you want to avenge Alusha? You. Can you do it? As soon as he finished speaking, Jalal suddenly opened his hands. Abruptly, a dazzling light suddenly rose from the vast and dark space, bringing with it a layer of phosphorescence that sprinkled on the ground, walls, and ceiling before merging into it. In the next second, in the vibration of the air, an extremely huge magic array spun and spread out, covering the entire floor in an instant. It wasn't just the floor. A mysterious magic array appeared on the surrounding walls and the ceiling above his head. Like the surface of a cube, the magic array was connected to each other, forming a strange space. Noah only felt a blur in front of his eyes. The originally spacious room disappeared and was replaced by an endless stretch of rocky land. This is... Noah couldn't help but be surprised. Are you satisfied? This is specially prepared for you. Jalal raised his hands proudly and said in a loud voice. This is a kind of ancient magic. It's a large-scale magic used to open up a battlefield to your advantage. Originally, this kind of large-scale magic was used in war, but now it's being used for you. You should feel proud, Noah Doria. A battlefield to my advantage. Noah noticed the key words. Entering this battlefield means that you have to follow the predetermined trap. Jalal's voice gradually became more and more excited. And the rule of this battlefield is that only two people can exist. Now, Noah understood. Jalal laughed out loud. That's right. Your golden wolf can't howl. Chapter 401. Golden Wolf. Jalal knows about the existence of Golden Wolf Bio. This guy had clearly been staying in the Paradise Tower all this time, building the R system. Under such circumstances, he was still paying attention to the outside world, including his own information. Noah frowned slightly and tried to sense the situation in his mind. Noah was still able to communicate with the Golden Wolf, Bio, through his mind. However, just like what Jalal said, Noah couldn't call out Golden Wolf Bio at all. It was as if Golden Wolf Bio was locked in his body and couldn't come out at all. This was a battlefield that could only exist in two people. What else can you do without that Golden Wolf? Jalal smiled coldly. My Paradise Tower is still missing a body and magic power equivalent to one of the 10 great saint magicians as a sacrifice. Your Golden Wolf is just right. I'll let you offer your strength to the great Jerf. After saying that, Jalal's eyes, which were full of tattoos, opened and closed, and the eyeballs inside disappeared completely, replaced by a hideous and terrifying pattern. It was as if a demon had attached itself to Jalal's body and turned one of his eyes into a demon's eye. In the next moment, Jalal moved. Wang! A powerful magic power that looked like a dark, filthy gas suddenly rose from Jalal's body. Let me see what you've got. Grandson of Makarov. Jalal raised his hand, and magic power that looked like black water suddenly rose from his palm and turned into a tentacle-like shadow. The tentacle-like shadow trembled slightly, and like a man-eating vine that was crawling toward its prey, the tentacle-like shadow rushed toward Noah with a sharp sound of breaking through the air. Noah glanced at the shadow that rushed toward him. His eyes narrowed little by little, and a hint of mockery flashed through his eyes. He didn't move at all. A moment later, two tentacle-like black shadows suddenly arrived with two gusts of wind. The sharp force was accompanied by an ear-piercing sound as it tore through the air. One from above and one from below, it ruthlessly lashed at Noah. Jalal's attack position was quite tricky. One on the top and one on the bottom, they happened to be in two difficult positions. If Noah chose to guard against only one area, then he would definitely be hit by the other. Clearly, even after sealing Bio, Jalal still did not underestimate Noah. It was a pity that Jalal had miscalculated Noah's strength. Under Jalal's gaze, Noah, who was standing still like a statue, shuddered violently when the two pitch-black attacks were about to hit him. Jalal could only see that Noah's body suddenly turned into an afterimage. Instead of retreating, he moved forward, and in the next moment, two phantoms shot out from Noah's body. Those were actually two fish shadows. The two fish shadows and the two tentacle-like shadows suddenly collided. Bang! In an instant, an extremely terrifying force erupted from the collision, as if it had materialized. A low muffled sound was heard, and a fierce force gushed out like a flood, shaking up a gust of wind, and then both dissipated. Jalal's pupils suddenly shrank. Then, in his pupils, an afterimage passed through the strong gust of wind, as if it was shuttling through the cracks of space, and rushed toward him. Seeing this scene, Jalal realized that he had underestimated Noah's strength. At first, Jalal thought that even if Noah could subdue the golden wolf Bio, it proved that he had some ability. But in the battle with Joseph, Noah did not make a move, and let the golden wolf Bio fight instead. That must be because his strength was not as strong as the golden wolf Bio, and it might even be far inferior. Therefore, Jalal guessed that even if Noah's strength was very strong, it could not reach the level of the 10 saints. And with Jalal's current strength, although it had not reached the level of the 10 saints, it was not far from it. Therefore, Jalal thought that it would not be difficult to defeat Noah in a one-on-one duel. However, seeing the strength and speed of Noah's magic, Jalal knew that he had guessed wrong. At that moment, Jalal stamped his foot, and his figure rapidly retreated. At this moment, an afterimage appeared, and Noah's figure was exposed in Jalal's vision again. His whole body shook, and a burst of violent magic vibrated out, turning into a substantial impact, like a storm, spreading in all directions. Wadash! Jalal's expression finally changed, and a shocked expression appeared on his face. This magic! How is it possible? As soon as he finished his sentence, the substantial impact of the magic caught up with Jalal, who was retreating, and fiercely collided with him. Boom! The ferocious impact vented on Jalal's body, and he was forced to retreat. His feet scraped a long mark on the ground, and he let out a muffled groan. A dull pain came from his chest, and some cold sweat appeared on Jalal's forehead. Chee! Before Jalal could catch his breath, a faint sound of something breaking through the air resounded. A black shadow suddenly appeared in front of Jalal, raised its head, and fixed its cold eyes on Jalal's face. Then, a shining fist covered by a vortex of airflow entered Jalal's eyes. Hiya! A sense of crisis rose in Jalal's heart, and his face became slightly crazed. He roared and suddenly stretched out his hand, which was shrouded in black light. It was like a black beast's claw, and with a wave of magic, it struck out fiercely. Suddenly, the fist carrying the bright vortex of airflow and the black beast's claw collided with each other like cannonballs. Bang! The shockingly loud sound was accompanied by a burst of violent wind that suddenly attacked in all directions. Kacha kacha kacha! The ground made of magic cracked under the attack of the violent impact wind, and the ground at the center of the impact directly exploded, sending countless gravel flying in all directions like bullets. It's not over yet. Jalal's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets, and his hands formed a palm shape. An extremely evil magic fluctuated in the center of his palms, and as Jalal struck out his palms, it turned into two spiraling black lights that shot toward Noah like sharp spears. If an attack like a beam of light fell on a human body, it would definitely be able to penetrate the fragile human body and open two bloody holes in it. However, Jalal didn't notice it. At this moment, Noah's figure was slightly illusory. Under such circumstances, Jalal's beam of black light finally closed in and hit Noah's body heavily. However, at the moment of impact, it strangely penetrated through Noah's body and fell to the ground behind. Bang! The ground that was hit by the black light exploded, and a cloud of smoke and fire rose. When the beam of black light penetrated Noah's body, Jalal's expression changed greatly. That was because it was only an afterimage. Is that it? Just as Jalal's expression changed greatly, a somewhat cold palm was gently placed on his back without him noticing. Jalal's hair stood on end, and all the hair on his body suddenly stood up. If that's the case, then let this battlefield made of ancient magic be your grave. As soon as the voice fell, the hand that was placed on Jalal's back shook and flashed with a dazzling phosphorescent light. Bang! The magic bullet that was shot out at zero distance was absolutely unavoidable. It exploded directly on Jalal's back, and a cloud of blue fire burst out. Jalal didn't even have time to make a sound before the violent impact from behind vented all on his body. Jalal was suddenly sent flying as if he had been hit by a truck. Bang! Jalal landed on the ground with a dull thud. He rolled a few times on the ground in a sorry state before he finally stabilized himself. His body went limp and fell to the ground. From the moment Jalal launched his attack on Noah to the moment he fell to the ground, the whole process took less than 10 seconds. In just 10 seconds, Jalal was defeated. Chapter 402. Whoosh! In the battlefield created by ancient magic, a storm was blowing violently around Noah, bringing along waves of dust and wind. He stood on the rocky ground like the eye of a typhoon. Gulp! Jalal, who had collapsed on the ground, clutched his chest. However, the pain came from his back, which made his face turn pale. He struggled to lift his body and cast his gaze at Noah, who had turned into the eye of the typhoon, with a complicated expression in his eyes. He was shocked by Noah's strength that was beyond his expectations. He was also in disbelief that he was defeated by Noah in just 10 seconds. However, there was also an indescribable ecstasy in Jalal's eyes. Jalal stared at Noah, whose entire body was erupting with vast amounts of mana as if it was a sea wave, squandering it in the most wasteful way possible and turning it into substantial waves that swirled around him like a tornado. After a long time, Jalal suddenly smiled. Ha! Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! That was a crazy laugh triggered by the ecstasy in his heart. This must be fate. Fate is on my side. There's no way to stop Jervis's resurrection. Ha 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 ha. Seeing Jalal laughing like a madman, Noah frowned deeply. How could Jalal laugh so happily in such a situation? If it were someone else, Noah would definitely think that the other party had been driven crazy. However, although Jalal seemed to be crazy, the ecstasy in his eyes was real, as if he had encountered something great. That burst of ecstasy even overshadowed the blow brought to Jalal by his defeat at the hands of Noah, making Jalal laugh like a madman. What? Noah sensed that there might be a reason that he didn't know, so he asked sarcastically. Are you that happy to be defeated so cleanly? Happy? Of course I'm happy. Jalal laughed as he struggled to stand up. Even though he still had a painful expression on his face, he was still laughing crazily. Especially when he looked at Noah, his eyes were full of fanaticism. Because the conditions for Jervis's resurrection have finally been met. Ha 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 ha. Jalal's ear-piercing laughter reverberated throughout the battlefield constructed by ancient magic for a long time. At the same time, in a conference room of the Fiori Kingdom's council branch, Zeke, who was discussing a topic with the surrounding counselors, suddenly froze, and then became ecstatic. Ha! Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! Just like Jalal on the other side of the world, Zeke suddenly laughed wildly without warning. He was abnormally excited. The counselors sitting in the other seats were all stunned. Even Urudia couldn't help but stare blankly at Kaiklane with a face full of astonishment. Zeke, what are you doing? Oge frowned and snorted coldly at Zeke. We're still in the middle of a meeting. You don't deserve your status as a counselor if you act so presumptuously. Counselor. Zeke looked around at everyone in the room with a sarcastic expression. That status, you old farts should cherish it. Leaving behind these words, Zeke's figure slowly became illusory. Not long after, he disappeared. All the counselors stood up in shock. What's wrong? Ajma exclaimed. What's going on? Just as he finished speaking, the ground suddenly shook. Paw, 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 paw. While the counselors were caught off guard, the surrounding walls, ceilings, floors, and even tables and chairs all fell into a weathered state, shattering bit by bit amidst a series of crisp sounds. Wah! Some of the cowardly counselors screamed and sat on the ground due to their weak legs. In the middle of these counselors, an enchanting figure stood there unaffected. It was none other than Eurelia. Although I don't know what happened, there seems to be some unexpected situation on the other side, making the plan go more smoothly. Urusha stretched out her hand and held a slowly rotating magic array as if she was holding a treasure. In that case, I can't let you get in the way. Hearing this, some of the more sharp-minded counselors, including Ajma, immediately understood. Both Zeke and Urusha were villains who had infiltrated the council for a certain purpose. At the same time, Noah, who was still on the battlefield constructed by ancient magic in the Paradise Tower, looked at Jalal, who was still laughing maniacally. Suddenly, he raised his head as if he sensed something and looked in front of him, which was right next to Jalal. There, Chicharito, who had disappeared from the council, slowly appeared beside Jalal like a phantom. His wild laughter was almost identical to that of Jalal's. Noah's gaze suddenly froze. It's you. I didn't think we'd meet again so soon. It was completely different from the last time they met. This time, Kieran's body was filled with the strange yet familiar evil aura that Noah felt at the same time. It was unfamiliar because Zeke didn't have such an evil aura in the past. The familiarity was due to the evil aura on Jermaine's body, which was exactly the same as that on Jalal's body. Noah's outstanding sensing ability and keen intuition allowed him to finally notice something. In the past, Noah had always felt something off about Zeke's body. Now, Noah understood the origin of this sense of dissonance. Oh. Jalal and Zeke raised their eyebrows at the same time. Did you notice? It should be said that you didn't notice until now. Your concealment skills are pretty good. Looking at Jalal and Zeke, who had the same expression, like two sides of a mirror, Noah laughed coldly. I didn't think you'd get a body of thoughts to sneak into the council. You've put in a lot of effort, Jalal. Yes. Body of thoughts. Zeke was Jalal's body of thoughts. The so-called body of thoughts referred to a three-dimensional projection or a doppelganger. In other words, Jalal and Zeke were not two different people, but one and the same. In order to not expose the identity of the body of thoughts, you've divided half of your magic into your body of thoughts, so that your body of thoughts can use magic on its own and act on its own, just like a real person, right? Noah was speechless. To think that even my sensing ability could only detect something amiss. Those fellows from the council are done for. Because it's necessary. Zeke, or more accurately, the body of thoughts of Jalal's doppelganger, grinned at Noah. Although the Tower of Paradise is being built in an orderly manner, if we want to activate our system, we're missing the most important and essential thing. Magic. Jalal raised one of his fists, and magic fluctuated like a black gas. If we want to activate magic, we definitely need magic. It's a pity that our system requires an enormous amount of 7 billion concepts of magic power. That's the amount of magic power that can be gathered by gathering all the sorcerers in the world. I don't know if that's enough magic power. Zeke narrowed his eyes. That's why we set our sights on the council's magic elven power. Hearing this, Noah's eyes flashed. Magic elven power. That was the council's strategic weapon. It was a combination of sorcerers with various attributes, and was equipped with various magic instruments. It could be fired from a distance using a satellite magic array, and was similar to a satellite ray, a super space-time destruction spell. It was said that once the magic elven power was activated, its power was enough to destroy a country. One could imagine how terrifying this super space-time destruction spell was. However, it was precisely because it was so powerful that the mana contained within it was definitely extraordinary. It was not strange that Jalal would set his sights on this. But now, there's no need. Jalal's tone changed, and he looked at Noah with fanaticism. Because I already have a better source of magic. Chapter 403. Seeing Jalal and Zeke staring at him with eyes full of ecstasy and fanaticism, and the meaning behind their words, Noah's face gradually turned cold. So that's how it is. So you've turned your attention to me. Noah finally understood why Jalal was so ecstatic. It was because the 7 billion concepts of mana that would take a lot of effort to gather, and it was said that even the magic shooters in the world could not gather it, was now right in front of Jalal. That's right. Noah was being targeted. Because of the unrestrained squandering of magic power, Jalal discovered the vast, ocean-like magic power in Noah's body and made the judgment that Noah himself could meet the demand of the 7 billion concepts of magic power. Perhaps, in terms of power, Noah had no way to achieve the super-destructive power that could destroy a country like the magic elven power. However, in terms of the amount of mana in Noah's body alone, even if it couldn't be said to be endless, it could be said to be boundless. It was definitely comparable to the strategic weapons of the Council. It was because of this that Jalal was so ecstatic. In other words, Jalal wanted to use Noah as a source of mana for the R system and use Noah as a sacrifice. To appear here when the Paradise Tower is about to be completed, I have to say, this is simply fate, Jalal and Kiran said in unison, full of confidence. You'll be the sacrifice for Gerald's resurrection and submit here. As soon as he finished speaking, Jalal's body became illusory. Like mist, he floated back into Jalal's body and became one with him. Wang. Along with the sound of the space vibrating, an oppressive magic power spread out from Jalal's body, filling every corner of his body. Even his aura rose fiercely, becoming incomparably powerful. If Jalal's strength wasn't at the level of one of the 10 great Saint Magi before, then now, his strength was definitely at the level of one of the 10 great Saint Magi. That was only natural. Kiran, who had half of Jalal's mana, originally had the title of one of the 10 great Saint Magi. Although Kiran's strength hadn't reached the level of a 10 saint, he wasn't far from it. In addition, his status as a counselor and the other requirement to become a 10 saint magus was to have a good character. This requirement allowed Kiran, who had concealed his true identity, to be recognized. It wouldn't be difficult for Kiran to become a 10 saint. Now, half of his mana returned to Jalal, who wasn't far from becoming one of the 10 great saints. It wasn't strange at all that Jalal's strength had reached the level of one of the 10 great saints. Now, Jalal was probably on par with people like Makarov, Joseph, Kildas, and Laxus. He might even surpass them. Let's start the second round. Jalal clenched his fist and sneered. His whole body was covered in blazing magic power. His voice carried a sense of oppression. I'll let you see my real magic. Saying this, Jalal crouched down like a cheetah and put his hands on the ground. His eyes were fixed on Noah. A golden magic array spun out from the ground under Jalal, and a dazzling golden light covered Jalal's body. Meteor. His voice seemed to have turned into an echo as it reverberated in the surroundings. Chi. Along with a faint sound of breaking through the air, Jalal, whose body was filled with golden light, turned into a meteor in the truest sense of the word. Then, he suddenly shot out violently. His speed was even faster than that of the golden wolf, Bo. Noah, who was calm and unruffled, had just turned serious when Jalal suddenly appeared in front of Noah. His whole body was covered in golden light, and his eyes flashed with evil light like a meteor. He suddenly clenched his fist, condensed his mana, and smashed it toward Noah's chest without any fancy moves. This punch wasn't tricky or ruthless. The only thing they had was the terrifying attack speed brought about by their terrifying speed. Under the influence of such a terrifying attack speed, the air around Jalal's fist was slightly disordered. It was as if an invisible vortex had formed around Jalal's fist. With an ear-piercing sound, he swung it forward. However, from beginning to end, except for Noah's obvious emotional fluctuation when he knew that Jalal had schemed against Elisha, Noah had always been calm and composed. With a calmness that was absolutely unbelievable to others, Noah judged that Jalal's strength had greatly exceeded his previous strength after Zeke's return and the use of the magic called meteor. After he had the strength of 10 saints, the mana in his body roared and flowed like a flood. Hum. Another vibration sound was heard, and a burst of rich white light quickly gushed out of Noah's body. Like a shock wave, it collided with Jalal's heavy fist. Bang! At the moment of collision, a loud explosion suddenly sounded. It was the sound of the bright brilliance of the magic called meteor on Jalal's body exploding. Paw! Without the help of the super-fast speed of a meteor, Jalal's straight punch was like a paper tiger to Noah. He just raised his hand and firmly caught it with a crisp sound. Jalal, who was confident in his super-fast attack, had a stiff expression on his face as he cried out in astonishment. "You crushed my magic. You actually have the same magic as Kilda's. So you didn't know?" Noah suddenly smiled. "Then I'm really sorry." While speaking, Noah's hand that was holding Jalal's fist suddenly burst with a ball of rich white light. Knowing the true nature of Noah's magic, Jalal knew that if he did nothing, then in the next moment, it would not be his magic that would be crushed, but his arm. This made Jalal couldn't help but shiver. His somewhat arrogant attitude due to the return of all his strength disappeared without a trace. He didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Meteor. Calling out the name of his magic in a more urgent voice than before, Jalal's body was once again covered by the bright brilliance. His figure once again turned into a meteor, fiercely breaking free from Noah, and in a breath, retreated rapidly. Whoosh! Under the sharp sound of breaking the air, Jalal, who had turned into a meteor, seemed to want to surround Noah. With Noah as the center, he drew a big circle, blocking all of Noah's escape routes with his own strength, and his speed was getting faster and faster. This Jalal is really something. Even if his strength is not as good as Bo's, his speed is already above Bo's. While a touch of surprise flashed in his heart, Noah felt a chill on his back. He immediately clenched his fist and fiercely smashed it behind him without hesitation. Bang! His fist swung through the air, and a figure just happened to flash out from behind Noah. His fist was faintly suffused with some black gas under the magic power, and when Noah's fist was about to hit him, he also swung his fist, and in a muffled sound, the two heavily collided. Chee! However, Jalal's fist only touched the ground for a moment, and the moment it collided with Noah's fist, he suddenly withdrew his fist. Golden light burst out from his body, and his meteor-like figure spun freely in the air, turning into a ray of light, leaving behind a long tail of light in a semicircle, and following a semicircle arc, he swept past Noah's body. At this moment, Noah finally let out a gasp of astonishment. Too fast. This time, before he could finish his words, the meteor-like figure came to Noah's back in the blink of an eye. He clenched his fist and fiercely smashed it toward Noah. With the help of the sensing ability, Noah noticed this blow in time. When Jalal's fist was only half a meter away from his back, he suddenly turned around and raised his hand to block. Bang! In another muffled sound, Jalal's fist solidly fell on Noah's raised arm, and a terrible force was released from it, causing Noah to stumble back a few steps. Then, he shook his shoulder hard and forcibly stabilized his body. For a moment, Noah was actually at a disadvantage. Chapter 404. After defeating Noah with one blow, Jalal's confidence seemed to have returned once again. His figure turned into a meteor and hovered around Noah, while his piercing laughter was constantly heard. "No matter how strong you are, as long as you can't catch up to my meteor, you won't be able to defeat me. You'd better obediently become Jalal's sacrifice." Hearing this, Noah slightly frowned. Relying on his excellent sensing ability, he continued to track Jalal's movements, but his mind was active. Indeed, in terms of strength, Noah was definitely superior to Jalal, but if he couldn't catch up to Jalal's speed, he would also be exhausted to death. While Noah's mind was active, an oppressive gust of wind came from behind him again. Surprisingly, it was Jalal's extremely fast attack with the help of his super high speed. "Show me, magician." Just as Jalal's attack was about to land on Noah, the incantation that summoned the soul and released the true power of the soul reverberated. Bang! A burst of cold blue flames burst out from Noah's body, startling Jalal. He hurriedly stopped his attack, manipulated his body, and dashed away like a meteor, putting some distance between them. The blue flames surged in the air like a volcanic eruption. At this moment, a black shadow cut through the air, parting the blue flames. Like a ray of black light, it suddenly shot out. Although the speed was not as fast as Jalal's meteor, the gap was not as big as before. So, Jalal only saw a blur in front of him, and a figure equipped with two pairs of inorganic mechanical wings the size of half a man on the back, with a lot of black light spurting out from the ports of the wings to form two pairs of huge wings of light imprinted in Jalal's eyes. Annihilation strike. The air whistled, and a fist carrying a dazzling vortex of air followed closely behind, bringing a strong wind with it, and heavily smashed into Jalal's chest. Hiya! Jalal was shocked, but his reaction was not slow. He shouted loudly, and the black magic swirled around his fist like a vortex. Instead of retreating, he moved forward to meet Noah's attack. Boom! The fist collided with the fist, and a powerful force burst out that caused the air to tremble a little. However, the power of Noah's annihilation strike was obviously stronger than Jalal's fist, which was strengthened by magic. When the two fists collided, a strong impact was transmitted to Jalal's arm, and then through Jalal's arm, it hit Jalal's body. Phew! After suffering such a heavy blow, Jalal let out a muffled groan from his throat. Golden light flickered on his body, and his light-like figure flashed away like a fish. Seeing this, Noah knew that he could not catch up with Jalal even with the help of the death feather form, so he did not pursue. Instead, he took a step back, squinted his eyes, and fully activated his sensing ability to detect Jalal's position. Apart from the crush, do you still have that kind of magic hidden? Jalal's angry voice came from all around. Obviously, the previous blow had caused him some damage, which made him a little angry. But, even so, can you catch up with me? As soon as he finished his words, a meteor flew out in a spiral, and actually shot toward the sky. At this moment, a burst of majestic magic burst out from Jalal, who had turned into a meteor. Ding, 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 ding. Under Noah's gaze, a golden magic array suddenly appeared around Jalal, and arranged itself like the Big Dipper. It contained an extremely terrifying attack, and the air was whistling. Accept the punishment of the Big Dipper. While Jalal, who was floating in the air, let out a wild laugh, the 7 magic arrays in the sky that looked like the Big Dipper connected with each other, and the whole array burst out a dazzling light. Feeling that the magic arrays contained extraordinary power, Noah squinted his eyes, and the death feather on his back spewed out a large amount of black light, forming a pushing force that made Noah's body disappear in an instant. 7-star sword. Just as Noah's body disappeared, the light and the magic arrays in the sky exploded. Several resplendent rays of light descended from the sky, landing heavily on the hard rocky ground. Boom! Immediately, the ground that was struck by the resplendent light directly exploded with a deafening boom, stirring up a dense cloud of dust and shockwaves that blew in all directions. Oh! This level of attack can't catch up with your current speed. But my celestial magic is not only at this level. Jalal, who was floating in the sky, laughed loudly, and made a hand gesture. The magic arrays that looked like the Big Dipper flashed again. 7-star sword rain. The moment his words fell, the magic arrays in the sky immediately burst into a strong light, and the strong light turned into rays of light, like raindrops, and burst out from those magic arrays, bringing along a burst of sharp sonic booms, like a curtain of rain, shrouding the ground. Noah's eyes flickered as he looked at the rain of light enveloping him like a curtain of rain. The terrifying power contained in those rays of light, if hit directly, 1 or 2 would be fine, but if there were more, even with Noah's current strength, he would be injured. Undoubtedly, this Jalal's comprehensive strength was not above Noah's, and was even a bit weaker, but he was able to contend with Noah by relying on his meteor, which could display an extremely terrifying speed. Now, because Noah released the power of the magician, the threat brought by the meteor was neutralized by Noah. If this continued, Jalal would undoubtedly be defeated. However, under such circumstances, Jalal used the 7-star sword rain magic, and each of those attacks was roughly equivalent to the attack power of a meteorite, which was really extraordinary. His speed was broken, and Jalal used a powerful magic to make up for his lack of strength, so Noah couldn't do anything to him for a while. Celestial magic was indeed a very powerful magic. If he couldn't find a chance to kill in one blow, then Noah would really have to waste time with this Jalal. Propelled by the death feather, Noah's figure rapidly retreated, leaving behind a series of afterimages in the air above the rocky ground. Paw 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 paw. However, as soon as the afterimages appeared, they would be enveloped by the 7-star sword rain that fell from the sky in the next moment, and directly exploded. Pang 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 pang. Under the attack of those meteorite-like attacks, the ground shook as if the sky was falling, and in the midst of the muffled explosions, one after another craters were blasted open, stirring up a lot of thick smoke and dust. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Even under such circumstances, the resplendent curtain of rain continued to envelop them. Ha 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 ha. Jalal's wild laughter kept echoing in the air. Therefore, Jalal, who was laughing wildly, didn't notice that while Noah was rapidly dodging, the magic in his body was also crazily gathering, causing one of Noah's arms to flash with a brilliant light. Since Jalal had endless tricks up his sleeve, then what Noah needed to do was to strike a killing blow that Jalal couldn't resist no matter what he did, and break this stalemate that Jalal had dragged into a war of attrition. It was for this purpose that Noah chose to dodge and save up his strength. Jalal gave up on using the meteor to deal with Noah, and instead gave Noah time to use a powerful magic. So, while dodging the attack of the 7-star sword rain, Noah slowly stretched out his hand. On that arm, a burst of magic power surged, and a gorgeous light burst out. Inside, a delicate pattern gradually emerged. At the same time, Noah softly chanted, "Gather! Guide the fairies' river of light." Suddenly, the sky was like a calm lake that had a big stone thrown into it, stirring up ripples that constantly spread out. Illuminate. For the sake of destroying the evil minions. Violent magic rose from Noah's body. Finally, Jalal, who had realized that something was wrong, suddenly changed his expression. Chapter 405. It was as if the entire sky was shaking. Space rippled, and the energy between the heavens and the earth became violent. Under the gaze of Jalal, whose expression changed abruptly, the sky that seemed to be trembling darkened for an instant. Shortly after, bursts of starlight suddenly appeared out of thin air. Under the influence of the violent magic energy that rose from Noah's body, the starlight spiraled and gathered together under the influence of the violent magic energy that rose from Noah's body. Not long after, under the convergence of starlight and magic power, a huge, gorgeous halo appeared above Jalal's head. It was like a door to the starry sky, converging in the sky. From the huge halo, Jalal felt a terrifying power that made his heart explode with a sense of crisis. His expression suddenly became full of horror. At this moment, Jalal finally understood. It seemed that he had been a little too confident from the beginning to the end. The person who was fighting with him was definitely not a rabbit that Jalal could casually capture as a sacrifice. He was a lion that could bite back at him at any time. Before Noah came to the Paradise Tower, Jalal had always thought that Noah was relying on the golden wolf Bio, who was an external force, based on the information he got from Zeke. Even if Noah showed extraordinary strength after coming here, Jalal didn't think that he would lose to Noah. After all, even Noah had to admit that the powerful, celestial magic made Jalal almost have no weaknesses. Whether in terms of strength or speed, he was not a match for any of the 10 great Saint Magus masters. But now, when this horrifying, gorgeous halo appeared, Jalal had to admit it no matter how much he didn't dare to believe it. If he wasn't careful, he might be defeated by this person. I'll admit it. You do have great power. Lowering his head, Jalal glared at Noah, who had his arms raised high, his entire body bursting with radiance like a river that soared into the sky, and yelled loudly. But you, who don't understand the greatness of Jalal and the true freedom, can't win against me. While yelling, Jalal raised his hands up high and crossed his arms in the shape of an X. All of a sudden, streams of black gas emerged from all directions around Jalal. Like flowing black water, they slowly converged above Jalal's crossed arms and condensed. As the black gas flowed in from all directions, a dark sphere slowly appeared above Jalal's crossed arms, and with the addition of the surrounding black gas, it became bigger and bigger little by little. Inside the pitch-black sphere, a terrifying energy was spreading, and it was quickly becoming denser. Seeing this scene, apart from Jalal's character, Noah did have some admiration for Jalal. Even if his overall strength was weaker than Noah's by a few notches, Jalal's means were still very superb. If it was someone else, even if their strength was higher than Jalal's, if they didn't have the means to deal with Jalal's celestial magic that combined strength, speed, destructive power, and killing skills into one, then they would definitely lose. Unfortunately, Jalal's opponent was none other than Noah. Just as you never understand why others can't understand you, others will never understand why you are bound by the so-called freedom and paradise you speak of. So, I'll return this sentence to you, Jalal. Bathed in the river of light, Noah's voice reverberated. You can't win against me. It's time to end this. Hearing this, Jalal revealed a hideous smile. Then let's see who will have the last laugh. As soon as Jalal's voice fell, the dark sphere above his crossed arms seemed to have come to life. Like a heart, it began to beat, and the dark light on the whole sphere suddenly became brighter. The rich black light wriggled and jumped along with the dark sphere. After a while, the dark sphere suspended above Jalal's crossed arms had condensed to the size of a person. An eerie mist continuously rose from the pitch-black sphere. It was clearly formed from magic power, but the pitch-black sphere looked even more real than it actually was. As if trying to suppress the filthy black light rising from the dark sphere, the magic rising from Noah's body turned into a river of light and poured into the huge brilliant halo in the sky, causing the brilliant halo to tremble and burst into a dazzling brilliance. Immediately, the dazzling halo suddenly fell and turned into a stream of light at an extremely terrifying speed. It broke through the air and fell around Jalal in an instant, surrounding him in the middle. Dark paradise. Jalal's expression changed, and he also made a move. He crossed his arms and swung them down forcefully, and the solid black sphere suddenly fell down, wrapping Jalal in it. At the same time, Noah extended his arm, which was glittering with dazzling radiance and intricate patterns, toward Jalal and clenched his hand down heavily. Fairy glitter. Suddenly, the huge halo shrank fiercely, and wherever it passed, the space shook violently. Accompanied by the shrinkage of the halo, the space expanded above the sky like a storm. It was like the condensation of a star before it exploded. The huge halo shrunk at an extremely fast speed, and with a boundless momentum, it viciously slammed into the pitch-black sphere. Between heaven and earth, everything was quiet. Boom! In the next second, a terrible loud noise suddenly sounded, bringing with it a huge sound wave. It was as if the sound wave was real, and it crazily spread out from the horizon, stirring up the dark clouds in the sky. In an encircling manner, the concentrated halo that fell on the dark sphere suddenly exploded at that moment. Like a huge wave in the sea, it exploded with a loud bang, bringing with it a dense fire that was enough to form a sea of fire and a terrible impact wave that rushed in all directions. The fire waves that blotted out the sky seemed to have covered the entire sky at this moment. The thick layer of dark clouds was completely evaporated at this moment. Those that were further away were like mice that had encountered a cat, suddenly dissipating under the attack of the frightening shockwave. Crack! After a while, with a cracking sound, the edge of this world directly cracked open. The moment the crack appeared, the entire world was swept away by the shock waves and waves of fire. Ripples spread out as the cracks rapidly spread apart. Crack, 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 crack. Amidst a series of crisp and resounding cracking sounds that made one's teeth ache, the entire world began to crack and spread rapidly. Bang! Like a mountain rock exploding, an astonishing loud noise suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. That was the sound of the world directly exploding. This battlefield constructed by ancient magic had finally completed its mission. In the most violent way, under the impact and fire that swept across the world, it disappeared, allowing the vast room on the top floor of the Paradise Tower to once again appear in the surroundings. Rumble, and under the impact and fire that hadn't had time to completely dissipate, the entire Paradise Tower trembled violently like an earthquake. Paw! The huge crystal in the center of the vast room shattered very straightforwardly, turning into fragments that covered the sky and earth. With amazing speed, the fragments violently shot in all directions. Each fragment contained a great force, shooting to the surroundings like bullets. However, most of these fragments shuttled into the attacking wind and fire waves, and were instantly vaporized into nothingness by the high temperature. Not even a light smoke was produced, and they were forcefully scattered by the ferocious air waves. Noah, who was standing on the ground, stared intently at the center of the attacking wind and fire wave with his pitch-black eyes. Some crystal fragments mixed with sharp wind flew past him with a swoosh-swooshed sound, but they were unable to distract him in the slightest. After a while, the impact wind and fire that permeated the entire space finally dissipated. Among them, a charred figure stagnated in mid-air for a while, then fell and smashed heavily on the ground of the room. The force brought by the acceleration of gravity even caused cracks to appear on the ground. The outcome was clear. Chapter 406. When Noah, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana parted ways and headed to the top floor of the Paradise Tower to look for Jalal, they were actually attacked by the soldiers in the entire Paradise Tower. That was to be expected. Jalal had installed magic crystals in the entire Paradise Tower for surveillance. Although he couldn't say that he could clearly see every move of everyone in the Paradise Tower, he could at least know where they were. Jalal judged that with his current strength, he would not be able to deal with Noah's golden wolf, Bio, who was able to kill Joseph. Before summoning his thought clone, Jalal had yet to summon back his thought clone. Therefore, In order to buy time to construct a battlefield and restrict Noah's golden wolf Beo's ancient magic, Jalal had to restrain Noah. After all, to be able to construct another space and set rules that were beneficial to oneself in advance, ancient magic wasn't something that could be used at will. It required a lot of time to prepare and carve a magic array that could construct a battlefield. Therefore, Jalal got the soldiers in the Paradise Tower to arrest Noah. Naturally, there was no way to really arrest Noah in that way. However, Jalal's goal was only to buy time, so as long as he could buy time, it would be enough. In order to repel all the attacking soldiers and find Jalal, Noah was delayed quite a bit, allowing Jalal to successfully complete the carving of the ancient magic array. And while Noah was dealing with the attacking soldiers in the Paradise Tower, Zayo, Wooly, and Milyana, led by Simon, arrived at Fairy Tale. At this time, the construction of the Fairy Tale was nearing completion with the help of various magic tools and the magic that the guild members were able to provide. Outside the Fairy Tale, Simon and the other three looked at the signboard that was hung high above the main door, and their hearts were more or less filled with emotions. Is this a proper guild? Wooly's eyes, which were like ornaments on his square face, widened. What a luxurious guild. Because of the expansion, Fairy Tale now looked like a huge castle. Looking at the huge castle in front of him, it was natural that Wooly, who had been living in the Tower of Paradise for the past 8 years, would be so excited. Zayo was also excited. However, she was excited about something else. Sister. Zayo had a complicated expression. Is sister inside? Hey, are we really going to go in and find little Elu? Milyana asked Simon timidly. It's all little Elu's companions inside. Hearing this, the four of them once again had complicated expressions. Companions. In the past, weren't they also Alusha's companions? Let's go in. Simon took a deep breath. We also have to make some closure for our past. Zayo, Wooly, and Milyana exchanged looks, mustered their courage, and nodded. Pushed the door that looked like a city's gate, and the four of them walked into the Paradise Tower. First, the four of them saw a place that looked like a commercial street. After passing through the place that looked like a commercial street, the four of them came to the interior of the guild with the door wide open. They went straight inside and came to the guild hall that looked more like an auditorium than a bar. There were tables and chairs lined up. Rebbe, who was sitting on a chair and chatting with Lucy, noticed Simon and the others and asked in confusion. Who are those people? They're not from the guild, right? Ha! Lucy just noticed and made a sound of surprise. It's true. What's the matter? Naz, who suddenly stood on the table, said with some excitement. Are they here to mess things up? They don't look like it. Gray also looked over, and his hands began to unconsciously pull at his clothes. However, they do have a feeling of magic on them. They should be sorcerers. Be careful. Alusha. Hubby flew to Alusha, who was engrossed in eating cake, and pointed in the direction of the door with some mischievous intentions. Someone is here to mess things up. Mess things up. Alusha turned her head in confusion. When she saw Zayo, Simon, Wooly, and Milyana looking around in the direction of the door, her eyes trembled and her pretty face changed drastically. She was stunned. Welcome to Fairy Tale. Just as the people in the guild were whispering and Alusha was stunned, the signboard girls, Mira and Lisanna, came in front of the four of them. Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with? Mira greeted the four of them with a gentle smile. Do you have any requests for us? If that's the case, you can discuss it with us. Lisanna also greeted them with a polite smile. The president is not here now. If you want to ask Fairy Tale sorcerers for help, you can discuss it with us directly. We are not here to make a request. Simon stepped forward and spoke on behalf of the four of them. We are here to look for someone. Look for someone. Lisanna was stunned. Sister. Zio couldn't help but stand up. It's Alasha. Is she here? Are you here to look for Alasha? Mira was a little surprised and looked in the direction of Alasha. Following Myra's gaze, Simon and the others also turned their gazes and saw Alasha standing there in a daze. Although it had been 8 years, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana all recognized each other at once, just like Alasha. Alasha. Simon, who had always been very calm, showed a rare trace of excitement. Alasha. Wooly didn't know whether to breathe a sigh of relief or a sigh. Little Alu. Miliana called out. Sister. Zio was the only one who stood there in a daze, not knowing how to react. What's wrong? Gray frowned and looked at Alasha. Do you know each other? Zio. Simon. Wooly. Miliana. Alasha didn't answer Gray's question. Instead, her face was filled with a complicated expression, and even a trace of fear appeared in her eyes. You. Why are you? Simon suppressed the excitement in his heart and regained his composure. He said to Alasha in a deep voice, let's talk about reunion later. Alasha, we're here to tell you that your companion has broken into the Tower of Paradise and is planning to fight Jalal head-on. What? What did you say? Alyssa finally stood up in shock and shouted anxiously, ignoring the fact that Simon's group of 4 had come here and making a living out of her various emotions. My companion. Who is it? We don't know his name either. Simon shook his head. All these years, I've been collecting all kinds of information about Fairy Tale, but there's no mention of him. We only know that there's a pure white emblem on the back of his right hand. That's the emblem of your guild. The emblem is on the back of his right hand. Or is it pure white? Lisanna interjected. Could it be Big Brother Noah? Noah. Alasha was completely confused. Why would Noah know about the Tower of Paradise? Why would Noah go to the Tower of Paradise? Why would Noah have a conflict with Jalal? Although I don't know why he broke into the Tower of Paradise, he went looking for Jalal because of you, little Elu, Miriana said to Alasha. We told him about what happened in the past and how you betrayed us and escaped from the tower alone. But he didn't believe us, so he went looking for Jalal. Sister. Zio finally stood up and shouted with a face full of excitement. You really didn't betray us. Zio. Alasha lowered her head in pain. I think it's better to talk about it later. Wooly nodded. If we don't go to the Tower of Paradise now, that Noah guy might be killed by Jalal. Alasha raised her head abruptly, her original timidity and hesitation all gone, replaced by her usual sternness. I will never allow such a thing to happen. Chapter 407. The dazzling magic power that rose like a river of light gradually began to dim, and Noah's figure was once again exposed to the air. Phew. Noah let out a long sigh to ease the fatigue that arose from using a large amount of magic power to cast the super spell. He raised his eyes and looked forward. On the ground that was scattered with crystal shards, Jalal, who was charred black and smoking, lay there as if he was dead. The evil aura on his body had become so weak that even Noah could only detect a trace of it. Noah, who had remained silent, slowly lifted his feet and walked forward. It didn't take long for him to arrive in front of Jalal. He looked down at Jalal, who seemed to be dead. Every corner of Jalal's body was charred black, as if he had just been thrown into a fire to be burned. There was no pity in Noah's eyes. There was no hatred or resentment. There was only the usual calmness in his eyes. This man who ended up in such a miserable state was indeed amazing. He was able to drag Noah, who was several times stronger than him, into a battle of attrition. He was only defeated now. However, no matter how amazing he was, the result represented everything. At this moment, Jalal was neither a noble member of the council nor a domineering ruler of the Paradise Tower. He was just a loser. That was all. Ha. Ha ha ha. Perhaps he had sensed that Noah had come to his side. Jalal continued to laugh, but there was an unconcealable weakness and confusion in his voice. Fairy glitter and fairy tale are two of the 3 super spells. It is a legendary super obliteration spell that can gather the light of the sun, moon, and stars and condense it into a merciless light that will never allow the enemy to survive. It is a super spell that can destroy all enemies. In the past 8 years, I have never slacked off on collecting information about the outside world. I also know that there are 3 super spells in the famous fairy tale, but the guild leader only has one of them. The other 2 super spells were completely buried with the death of the first guild leader. Jalal revealed a sadistic smile. If I remember correctly, Makarov's super spell should be Fairy Law. It is a legendary super trial spell that uses holy light to crusade against darkness. It targets everything that the caster considers to be his enemy and destroys them mentally. I thought you would use this super spell, but I didn't expect you to use Fairy Glitter. It seems that the 3 super spells of Fairy Tale are about to reappear in the world. Hearing this, Noah didn't refute or agree. He only said this sentence in an indifferent tone. Your celestial spell is very powerful. Is it? Jalal laughed sarcastically. You are indeed a member of Fairy Tale. Facing the enemy who wanted to take your life and use you as a sacrifice, you can still say such comforting words after the enemy has been defeated. You are really gentle, just like Alusha, but aren't you a bit too naive? If you want me to spit at my defeated opponent, then I'm sorry, I don't have that kind of hobby. I'm just telling you the truth or comforting you. You know very well in your heart. Noah's tone did not carry any emotion. There was only a sense of authenticity, as if he was telling the truth. Whether I am naive or not, it is all up to you. So, what are you going to do next? Even though his voice revealed a hint of weakness that was difficult to hide, Jalal still seemed to be unwilling to show weakness in front of Noah, and laughed arrogantly. You want to take my life? Just because you deceived Alusha, used Alusha, and planned to take Alusha's life, I should take your life. Saying such a sentence, Noah looked forward, and a trace of coldness appeared in his eyes little by little. It's just that when I attack you, those sneaky rats won't mind taking the opportunity to ambush you, am I right? Hearing Noah's words, Jalal was stunned for a moment, but then he seemed to have realized something, and his face darkened. At the same time, in the place where Noah's gaze landed, a somewhat charming laughter echoed. As expected of the man who defeated both Jalal and Joseph. I didn't expect you to notice my presence. I only just arrived. Saying such a sentence, in the shadow ahead, an enchanting figure accompanied by a magic circle appeared out of thin air. Under the rhythm of the magic circle from top to bottom, she gradually appeared before Noah's eyes. As expected, Sir Zeke's sudden disappearance was due to an unexpected situation at the Paradise Tower. I came to take a look out of curiosity, but I didn't expect to see someone who shouldn't be here. The enchanting figure, Burudia, held a crystal ball and bowed to Noah. Nice to meet you, Sir Noah. Let's put it this way for now. Burudia, Jalal said in astonishment. Why are you here? Of course, I am here to witness the outcome of the unexpected situation. Burudia revealed a cute smile at Jalal, but that smile was just like a poisonous spider's. In the end, Sir Jalal, you are indeed at the end of your road. But it doesn't matter, I have had a lot of fun in the past 8 years. Thank you very much for your company. Fun. Jalal's heart trembled. So that's how it is, Noah suddenly said. I have always been curious as to why Jalal, who was locked up in the torture chamber 8 years ago, would change so much. At first, I thought it was because he accidentally awakened magic and lost himself because his body and mind couldn't keep up with the power of magic. But now, it seems that everything is your doing. What did you say? Jalal showed a shaken expression, but what he got in return was Urrudia's charming laughter. Actually, there is nothing to hide. What Urrutia said next was a severe blow to Jalal's evil body and mind. I pretended to be Gerald's undead and brainwashed Jalal, instilling the obsession of resurrecting Gerald into his heart. For the past 8 years, he has been. At this moment, Jalal felt as though his entire head had exploded, and everything went blank. However, neither Noah nor Urrutia paid attention to Jalal, who was at the end of his road. Noah stared at Urrutia and suddenly laughed. In other words, in the end, the one who caused Alusha so much pain was you. Urrutia grinned. It's quite interesting, isn't it? When these words came out of Urrutia's mouth, a strong sense of crisis rose in her heart, causing her expression to stiffen. The look in her eyes changed drastically, and she took a step back without hesitation. Clang! At this moment, a dazzling sword light accompanied by a crisp sword cry suddenly appeared and slashed toward Urrutia. Rip! Because she took a step back in time, the brilliant sword light flashed past her original position. It couldn't cut Urrutia's body, but the front of Urrutia's clothes were cut open. Feeling as though an ice-cold dagger had brushed past her body, Urrutia's heart clenched fiercely. She couldn't care less about covering her exposed skin and raised the crystal ball in her hand. Future flash. The crystal ball lying quietly in Urrutia's hand suddenly trembled. It suddenly split into dozens of crystal balls. Like cannonballs, the crystal balls flew against the atmosphere. Amidst the piercing sound of air breaking, the crystal balls ruthlessly shot in front of Urrutia. Buzz! However, at the same time, an intricate magic array rotated in front of the crystal balls, suddenly releasing a burst of strong light. An extremely dazzling beam of light burst out from it, enveloping the dozens of crystal balls that were flying over. Bang! All the crystal balls exploded under the attack of the laser beam. Then, the beam of light rushed toward Urrutia without slowing down. Urrutia's expression changed greatly. In the next moment, Urrutia's figure was completely engulfed by the beam of light. Boom! A loud sound resounded through the Paradise Tower. Chapter 408. Boom! Amidst an astonishing loud noise, a bright beam of light blasted through the wall of the Paradise Tower and shot out from the inside. It was exposed to the sunlight and swept into the sky without slowing down, disappearing into the sky. Whoosh! In the spacious room on the top floor of the Paradise Tower, thick smoke, fire, and strong wind were fluctuating in all directions like a typhoon. In the sharp sound of the wind, it blew to every corner. Bang! Jalal, who had collapsed on the ground, was unsurprisingly blown away and hit hard against a wall. Phew! Jalal, who had used up all of his mana and was unable to move due to the wounds all over his body, could only endure the excruciating pain of crashing into the wall. He let out a pained groan before softly sliding down to the ground. However, the pain from his body couldn't erase the impact on Jalal's heart at all. Under such circumstances, Jalal struggled to raise his head and looked at Noah, who was levitating in the air with the help of Feather of Death. There was a magic circle full of phosphorescent light rotating in front of Noah. Noah was holding a black knight's sword in his hand, and Jalal couldn't help but laugh bitterly. That sword, I've never seen it before. At this moment, Jalal finally understood. In the previous battle, Noah was still holding back and not using any of his techniques. Jalal sensed an extraordinary aura from the Dark Knight's sword, which was engraved with mysterious runes on its body. Obviously, that sword was as extraordinary as it looked. In the previous battle, if Noah had used this sword, Jalal would have been defeated even faster. In addition, there was the Golden Wolf, which was so powerful that it could easily kill one of the top 10 Saint Master Magi, and the 3 great magic spells, Fairy Tale, which was famous in the magic world. Noah Doria. Just how strong was this man? Noah didn't know about the shock and bitterness in Jalal's heart. At this time, Noah, who was holding the knight's sword and floating in the air under the support of the magician in the form of Death Feather, said calmly with a magic circle rotating in front of him. His eyes were like arrows as he looked at the thick smoke in front of him. Come out. As soon as the voice faded, the smoke and dust in front of Noah became slightly chaotic. A figure with tattered clothes fell out of the smoke. His originally fair skin had many black marks, and even his face was covered in dust. He was in a sorry state. He actually made a move. Urudia, who was in an extremely sorry state, looked extremely ugly at this moment. She looked at Noah, who was floating in the air not far away, and her eyes flashed with anger and fear. She was different from Jalal, who could get the title of one of the top 10 Saint Master Magi with just a clone of the body of longing. Although Urudia's strength was not bad, it was only about the same as Zeke-in. There was still a big gap between her and Jalal, who had recovered his full strength and was very powerful even among the top 10 Saint Masters. Urudia's uniqueness lay in the fact that her magic was more special than Jalal's. Therefore, although Urudia's figure was in a sorry state, she was not injured by the previous bombardment. Therefore, Urudia knew that compared to Noah, who could defeat Jalal, she was definitely not his match. However, Urudia thought that Noah must have consumed a lot of his magic power in the battle with Jalal. Even if he was powerful, he should be in a weakened state now, which was why she showed herself. However, Urudia didn't expect that not only was Noah not weak at all, but he also made a move without hesitation, almost killing her instantly. When did such a terrifying person appear in a fairy tale? Not only did he tame such a golden wolf, but he also has such strength. Urudia's eyes flickered. It seems that I have to go back and report this to the higher-ups. What? Want to escape? Noah, who saw Urudia's intention to retreat, tightened his grip on the knight's sword and sneered. Do you think that if I don't help Alusha get revenge, I'll let you escape? After saying that, Noah's expression suddenly froze on his face. He turned his head abruptly and looked in another direction. At the entrance of this vast room, several figures rushed over. Amidst the chaotic sound of footsteps, they appeared in front of everyone's eyes. There were about 10 or so people who had come. Among them, there were people that Noah was very familiar with, and there were also people that Jalal was very familiar with. Even Urudia was very familiar with some of them. They were Zayo, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana, as well as Naz, Gray, Lucy, and Hubby, who had gone to Fairy Tale to seek help. As for the person in the lead, it was naturally Alusha. Noah. Seeing that Noah, who was floating in the air, was safe and sound, Alusha secretly heaved a sigh of relief. However, when she saw Jalal, who had fallen to the side, Alusha's eyes became serious. Jalal. Zayo, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana also saw the unscathed Noah and the charred Jalal. They instantly cried out in surprise. Could it be that Jalal was defeated by Noah? What? What? Lucy had a blank look on her face. What's the situation now? Is the fight over? Naz clenched his fists and looked like a violent person. He shouted loudly at Urudia, the only one who was still standing apart from Noah. Are you the enemy? Who are you? Unlike Naz, when Grace saw Urudia's full appearance, especially her face that was covered in dust, he felt that it was a little familiar. This made him anxious. You. Instead, Alusha, who had been to the council, recognized Urudia and said in surprise. Are you Urudia? You are you. This name seemed to have an extraordinary meaning to Gray. Gray was stunned. Good chance. Seeing that everyone's attention was suddenly taken away by the sudden intruder, Burudia, who was holding her clothes with one hand and hiding her beautiful figure under the tattered cloth, suddenly raised the crystal ball in her hand again. Arc of time. A strong light suddenly rose from the crystal ball in Urudia's hand. Rumble. Just like that, the entire Paradise Pagoda suddenly trembled. Moreover, with an extremely shocking speed, as if it was about to collapse, the tremors abruptly shook. Kacha kacha kacha. The ground broke apart inch by inch. Boom. The ceiling was directly shattered. Paw. Even the walls seemed to have been weathered and turned into dust and began to dissipate. Woo 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 woo. Naz, Gray, Lucy, Hubby, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana didn't even have time to react to what had happened. The ground suddenly collapsed, causing them to lose their balance and sway along with the fragments of the collapsed ground. Boom! Noah swung his sword and shattered a huge piece of the ceiling that had fallen above him. Then, he turned his head and looked at Urudia. Unfortunately, there was only a pile of rocks left. What's going on? Damn it! The ground has cracked. Ugh, so disgusting, no way. Naz. You even get dizzy from sitting on stones. Without giving Noah time to be annoyed, the exclamations of Naz and the others entered Noah's ears. Noah reacted, turned around, and flew toward Naz and the others. Noah. Alusha, who was also sitting on a piece of cracked ground, first shouted in Noah's direction. Then, she remembered something and quickly turned her gaze to Jalal's direction. The tower that took 8 years to build has collapsed just like that. Jalal, who was lying on the ground, looked up with his unfocused eyes. He watched as the top of the tower cracked and shattered bit by bit and laughed self-deprecatingly. Fine. Let this pointless tower that I spent 8 years building become my grave. Ha 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 ha. Amidst the wild laughter, Alusha watched as Jalal was buried by the falling stones and didn't speak for a long time. Chapter 409. Rumble. Amidst the thunderous noise, the Tower of Paradise that towered over the ocean like a towering tree seemed to have lost its support. While stirring up smoke and dust that soared into the sky, it slowly shattered and collapsed. Crash! Pieces of huge stones that were originally used to form the Tower of Paradise fell into the sea, stirring up bursts of waves. The huge Tower of Paradise slowly sank into the sea like a dragon palace that had sunk to the bottom of the sea. After an unknown amount of time, the Tower of Paradise finally ushered in the fate of completely disappearing. It sank to the bottom of the sea amidst the tumbling waves. Fortunately, in the process of Noah heading to Jalal's location, the soldiers who were supposed to be in the Tower of Paradise were all defeated by Noah. They fled in the remaining ships in a sorry state. Otherwise, if the Tower of Paradise sank, who knew how many casualties it would cause? Not far from the Paradise Tower, a ship made of steel floated on the sea surface. With Noah as the leader, Alusha, Naz, Gray, Lucy, Hubby, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miriana were all sitting on the steel ship transformed by the magician. Except for Naz, who was dizzy with transportation, they all looked at the Tower of Paradise that had sunk to the bottom of the sea. Our Tower of Paradise, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana watched as Paradise Tower sank to the bottom of the sea. Apart from being stunned, there was nothing else they could do. Not to mention Miriana and the others, even Alusha looked at all this with a complicated expression and fell into silence. For Alusha and the others, the meaning of the Tower of Paradise was extraordinary. Here, including Alusha, Zio, Simon, Wooly, Miriana, and the others got to know each other. For the first time, they had the concept of companions and companions. Here, Alusha and the others suffered the abuse and destruction of the magic order who had enslaved them. They lived a hellish life that was not like humans at all. Here, Alusha was exiled by Jalal with a heart full of pain and sorrow. She was accused of paying for Jalal's ambitions and sacrificed the lives of her companions. Here, Zayo, Simon, Wooly, and Miljana spent a total of 8 years to build the tower that was either a symbol of existence or a curse. Now, this place had finally returned to dust and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Nothing was left. For Alusha and the others, it was easy to imagine how complicated their feelings were after witnessing all of this. Compared to Alusha and the others, Gray and Lucy were completely baffled. In the end, I thought we would encounter a fierce battle here, but we're only here to witness the end of this tower. Lucy sighed. Furthermore, I nearly lost my life. Love. Hubby was as spirited as ever. It's all thanks to Noah. That woman. Gray couldn't help but be immersed in Yerusha's dusty face and quietly clenched his fist. Yerusha, huh? At the same time, Alusha raised her feet and walked towards Noah, who was standing at the bow of the ship and also looking at the Paradise Tower that had sunk to the bottom of the ocean. She stood side by side with him and looked into the distance. It was just like when they were looking at the scenery and chatting by the river bank in the forest. However, compared to the past, Alusha's feelings were more complicated now. Why did you come to the Paradise Tower and even duel with Jalal? Hearing Alusha's words in a somewhat heavy tone, Noah casually responded as if he didn't notice the complicated feelings in Alusha's heart. Just treat it as a childhood sweetheart worrying about unnecessary things. How can that be the same? Alusha couldn't help but raise her voice a little. If something goes wrong, you might not be able to go back. Even if that's the case, what's the difference? Noah replied indifferently. I believe that if it were you, if you were in the same situation, you would also jump into the fire without a care for your own safety, right? Alusha opened her mouth slightly but couldn't say anything. At this time, Noah glanced at Alusha and smiled. I said that I envy you for having a past. I also said that no matter if it's a painful past, a sad past, or a despairing past, it's all evidence to prove your existence, right? Alusha couldn't help but be startled. Actually, there's something I didn't say after that. Under Alusha's startled gaze, Noah smiled freely. That smile was deeply imprinted in Alusha's heart. Although I envy you for having a past that can prove your existence, if it's possible, I really don't want it to exist. As proof of your existence, you only need a fairy tale, and that's enough. You only need a fairy tale, and that's enough. Alusha lowered her head and repeated this sentence in a whisper. You only need a fairy tale, and that's enough, yes. Noah's voice echoed clearly in Alusha's ears. So, those unbearable memories of the past don't matter. As he said this, Noah turned around and put his arm around Alusha's slender shoulders. He turned Alusha around to face another direction. Of course, I'm not asking you to abandon all of your past. You still have responsibilities that you need to complete. Hearing this, Alusha came back to her senses and looked ahead. Immediately, she saw Zayo, Simon, Wooly, and Miljana staring blankly in the direction of the Paradise Tower that had sunk to the bottom of the sea. Their faces were filled with confusion and emptiness. Unlike you, there's really no evidence to prove their existence. Noah sighed. Whether it's to end things with the past or for the sake of your former companions, you still need to talk to them. Suddenly, Alusha's eyes became brighter and brighter. The complicated feelings that originally existed in her eyes disappeared bit by bit. That's true. Staring at Zayo, Simon, Wooly, and Miljana, Alusha finally smiled. That's true. Seeing Alusha's unprecedentedly beautiful smile and the sudden brightness in her eyes, Noah couldn't help but smile as well. Because Noah knew. From this moment on, Alusha would really try to get rid of the past and become the fairy queen that truly belonged to the fairy tale. So, the two looked at each other and smiled. As usual, they had a tacit understanding and didn't need to say anything. Wow! Not far away, hubby, who was flying in the air, pointed at Lucy. Lucy, look over there, the atmosphere seems to be very good. Ha ha ha. Lucy smiled insincerely. Really? What's wrong? Hubby asked Lucy in confusion. Isn't that the case? No, the atmosphere is really good, Lucy complained. But when I think about how one of the protagonists already has a girlfriend, or even two, I don't think it's romantic at all. Oh. Hubby covered his mouth and snickered. Lucy, are you jealous? No way. Lucy blushed and glared at hubby. What are you talking about, stinky cat? There's something. Hubby didn't seem to see Lucy's angry look and laughed out loud with his long tongue curled. Don't curl your tongue. Lucy's frantic voice resounded through the sky. Ugh. Beside Lucy and hubby, Nazi was lying on the edge of the boat. His face was livid and uncomfortable, and he looked like he wanted to vomit but couldn't. So disgusting, looking at Lucy, who was frantically interacting with hubby, Naz, who was lying on the ground, unable to stand up, Gray, who had a thoughtful look on his face, and Alyssa, who was walking towards Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miriana, who were at a loss. Noah turned around and looked into the distance, his heart constantly fluctuating. Although this trip to the Paradise Tower eventually developed to the point where he had to settle the past for Alusha, the result was still good. Now, the dangerous, our system, had sunk, and Jalal had sunk to the bottom of the sea with the Paradise Tower that he had built for 8 meaningless years. Alusha would also bury the hatchet with her former partner, and everything was going in a good direction. The only variable was probably Urudia. She used Jalal's 8 years of time and sank the tower to the bottom of the sea without hesitation. Noah looked at the sky. You, who are you? Chapter 4:10. Just like that, 3 days passed quietly. During these 3 days, Noah and company stayed in a city by the sea. During this time, Alusha had a long conversation with Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana. After that long conversation, Alusha, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana finally resolved all their misunderstandings and buried the hatchet. Just like 8 years ago, they became partners that could rely on each other. Although it couldn't be said that they were extremely close, there were no more grudges between them. However, perhaps because of what Noah had said, Zio seemed to have always been unable to trust Alusha and had always wronged Alusha. She even resented Alusha because of this. In order to enlighten such as Zio, the extremely domineering Alusha directly barged into the hotel room where Noah was staying and reprimanded Noah. With regards to this, Noah could only keep rolling his eyes. Who was all this for? Wasn't it because of Alusha that Noah had said those words to Zio back then? Besides, those words weren't wrong. Otherwise, Zio wouldn't have felt guilty, right? However, it was said that women were unreasonable. This characteristic was even more obvious when it came to Alusha. With no other choice, Noah could only helplessly find Zio and have a long conversation with her. After that, Zio finally let go of this matter. It was worth mentioning that Gray was the opposite. He seemed to have become a little preoccupied. Even though he usually acted the same when interacting with Noah, Alusha, Naz, and the others, Noah realized that Gray was secretly using some channels to gather information on someone. Apart from that, Gray was no different from usual. Regarding this, although Noah was a little concerned about this first childhood playmate of his, if Gray didn't want to talk about it, Noah wouldn't ask. He could only choose to watch from afar. However, just like with Alusha, Noah wouldn't take the initiative to ask about his worries. But once he discovered that something was wrong with Gray, Noah would take the initiative to deal with Gray, just like when he barged into the Paradise Tower for Alusha. Therefore, after 3 days of peaceful and perfect life with some ripples, Noah and the others finally parted ways with Miliana and the others. Are we really leaving? At the entrance of the hotel, Alyssa stared intently at Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miriana standing in front of her. Although she didn't show any obvious reluctance, she still couldn't let go of her feelings. Actually, you can also come to Fairy Tale with me. Hearing this, the 4 of them looked at each other and smiled. We also want to be with you, little Elu, Miliana said lively. But we've always lived in the tower, and now we really want to go around. I have a younger sister. Simon looked at Alusha's pretty face as if he wanted to remember Alusha's face. After a while, he closed his eyes and smiled. Back then, our village was attacked by the magic order, and I was taken to the Paradise Tower. I don't know if my sister is alive or dead, so I want to find her. I also have an elder brother. Wooly sighed. Although I don't know where he is now, I also want to find him. So, I'll look for him while traveling. This is the life that a protagonist should have. That's it, sister. Zio changed her usual gloomy appearance and now had a cheerful expression. We don't want to cause trouble for you, sister. We also have the life we want. Even if we don't know what life is like outside, please let us try. Hearing the words of Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana, Alusha fell silent. This reason is a little forced, Gray, who was quietly watching this scene from the back, said softly. If you really want to find your sister or brother, coming to Fairy Tale should be faster. If you ask the guild leader, you will definitely be able to find them. Indeed, the guild leader has dealings with the guild leaders of many large guilds. If you spread the news to find them, it will definitely be more useful than them looking for them themselves, Lucy said in confusion. Why do you still choose to leave? If I have to say it, there must be a reason. Noah shook his head and sighed. Simon and the others have never lived outside. If they want to adapt, it will definitely take a long time. And for these former companions, Alusha will do her best. But in that case, it will really be them causing trouble for Alusha, so they want to leave, right? There was another reason that Noah didn't mention. Apart from Simon, in the past 8 years, Zio, Wooly, and Miliana had always believed that Alusha had abandoned them and fled alone. Now, although the truth was out, these people would still feel guilty toward Alusha and wouldn't know how to interact with Alusha. In addition, knowing that Alusha had been hiding this painful past for the past 8 years, Simon and the others would decide to leave, right? After all, to Alusha, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana were the representatives of that painful past. If she kept looking at their faces, perhaps she would never be able to forget them, right? I can understand Simon and Wooly's feelings. At this moment, Naz did not have his usual sloppy attitude and said very seriously. Like them, I've always wanted to find Ignir. Love. Habby raised his hand. So, we can't stop them. Then, I hope they can live better in the future. Lucy sincerely hoped. After all, they are already very pitiful. Noah, Naz, Gray, and even Habby nodded. Noah. Simon suddenly called out to Noah. Can we talk alone? With me? Noah was startled, but he still nodded. No problem. Under Simon's lead, Noah came to a place a little further away from Alusha and the others. As soon as he opened his mouth, Simon said something that stunned Noah. Actually, I've always liked Alusha, ever since I was a child. Like? Alusha. Noah was a little stunned, as if there was no way to connect these 2 words together. That didn't mean that Alusha wasn't charming and wasn't worthy of others' liking. On the contrary, Alusha was really beautiful based on appearance alone. Otherwise, she wouldn't have received the title of Fairy Queen. It was just that Alusha's usual style of doing things was too straightforward and valiant, making it difficult for people to associate her with love. Don't be so surprised. Although I like Alusha, I never thought of being with Alusha as a lover. For us, that's definitely not the best relationship. Simon smiled freely. Moreover, I can also see that Alusha only treats me as a companion, a close friend, or a brother. There is no other meaning, so I will hide this feeling in my heart. This. If it's your choice, I naturally won't raise any opinions. Noah scratched his cheek and said in confusion. But, why did you tell me this? Hearing this, Simon turned his head and fixed his gaze on Noah. It was only when he saw that Noah was a little uneasy that he spoke up helplessly. Because I can see that Alusha treats you differently from others. Alusha treats me differently. Noah was surprised. How is it different? Alusha's favorite food now is cake, right? Simon's voice became more helpless. Actually, when we were in the Paradise Tower, Alusha didn't have any obvious taste for food, but I heard from Gray that when Alusha joined Fairy Tale, you gave her a cake. Since then, Alusha likes to eat cake. Ah. Noah laughed dryly. That doesn't mean anything, right? Alusha is very bad at expressing her feelings. It can't be helped, I can see her clumsiness better than you. Simon patted Noah's shoulder. So, in the future, I'll leave Alusha in your hands. Hearing Simon's words, Noah was speechless. If I told him that I already have 2 women who are destined to be together for life, would he still say the same thing to me? I'm afraid that at that time, he would have the heart to kill me, right? Chapter 4:11. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days had passed since Sho, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana left. In a leisurely state, Noah and his team traveled leisurely while playing. After 3 days, they finally returned to the castle-like fairy tale that had been completely rebuilt. Of course, the current fairy tale was not only domineering on the outside, but it was also equipped with a defense system that Noah had set up using a large number of runic runes. Moreover, the most central part of the fairy tale was equipped with a magic crystal that was larger than a person. As long as the magic crystal was continuously supplied with mana, the defense system formed by the runic runes engraved on the fairy tale would remain active and protect the fairy tale from being invaded. As soon as they returned to the fairy tale, Noah and his party were called over by Makarov. The council has been dissolved. After hearing the important news that Makarov revealed, Noah, Alusha, Naz, Gray, Lucy, and even Habe were all shocked. There's nothing strange about this, Makarov said solemnly with his arms crossed. This time, not only did spies like Kikrane and Urudia infiltrate the council, but because of Urudia, the entire council system was disintegrated and can no longer operate. All the council members have stepped down without exception. Now, the higher-ups seem to be debating about this matter. It is said that a new council will be formed soon for the sake of peace, security, and order in the magic world. But before that, without the council, there will be a lot of turmoil in the magic world, Mira added. Currently, because of the dissolution of the council, many dark guilds and magic orders that were originally operating in the dark have begun to emerge and cause a lot of trouble. Because of this, many magic shooters in our guild have been sent out to annihilate them. It's no wonder why I haven't seen Kana or Elfman since the start of the battle. Even the strongest members of the guild are nowhere to be seen. So, that was the reason. Noah frowned. But, is that okay? Although Kana, Elfman, Naz, and Gray were all magic shooters in Fairy Tale who were active on the front lines, but with just 1 or 2 of them, wasn't it a little too much for them to deal with an entire guild and an entire church? Alusha seemed to have thought of this problem as well. She took a step forward and made a declaration with a strong and powerful voice. Guild leader, let me go as well. Me too. Naz was excited. We didn't even get into a fight when we were in the Paradise Tower. This time, I must have a good fight. Hey, this is a quest, not a game. Lucy was a little timid. Our opponents are all dark guilds and magic orders. Naz, think about it carefully. But we can't let these guys continue to cause trouble. Gray also took a step forward and looked at Makarov. If there's a need, let us go. Guild leader. No way. Lucy's face was full of tears. Are we really going to do such a dangerous thing? Well, you guys calm down first. Lisanna, who was standing beside Mira, said with a smile. The guild leader has also considered the things you guys have considered. Kana and Brother Elfman are only dealing with a few weak dark guilds and magic orders. Nothing will happen. You guys can rest assured. After all, the council has just been disbanded not long ago. Those truly powerful dark guilds and magic orders are still observing. Only those weak dark guilds and magic orders will not be able to hold themselves back and take action. Mira also gently advised. So, right now, we only need high mages like Kana and Elfman to take action. However, not long after, when those truly powerful dark guilds and magic orders take action, we will need the S-rank high mages in the guild to take action. Naz. Gray. Make your preparations first. Soon, there will be a quest for you guys. Makarov said loudly. Lucy, your strength is still insufficient. So, you should wait for orders first. Yes. Lucy couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Yes. Naz and Gray also responded in various ways. As for Noah and Alusha, you guys should also wait for orders temporarily. Makarov turned his gaze to Noah and Alusha. When the situation worsens to the point where we need S-rank high mages to take action, it will be time for you guys to take action. Understood, guild leader. Alusha nodded in response. S-rank high mages. Noah couldn't help but glance at Mira and quietly held her hand. Don't tell me you will also need to take action when the time comes. Not for the time being. After all, I am no longer working as a high mage. Mira had a sweet smile on her face as she held Noah's hand and replied. But, if there is a need for manpower, I will also take action. Mira might also take action. Gray raised his eyebrows. It has been a long time since we last met, Mira Jenny of the Demon. Let us see how much your strength has improved in these 2 years. I am burning up. Naz was so excited that he was spitting fire. What? Miss Mira is also going to take action. Lucy looked at the gentle and smiling Mira in astonishment and couldn't help but tug at Noah's sleeve. Is that really okay? You don't have to worry about that. Noah smiled helplessly. Don't be prejudiced by first impressions. You should know that even 2 years ago, Mira had already taken action to annihilate many dark guilds and magic orders. She is a woman who will take action when the time comes. That was why Mira began to change herself the next day after Noah casually said those words when he left Fairy Tale. Moreover, when Noah returned, even if she knew that Noah had a relationship with Lisanna, Mira still did not hesitate to take action. She was so tempting that Noah could not resist and devoured her completely. In this regard, Noah could only say that even if she really showed her gentleness, the valiance in the depths of Myra's heart still existed. However, I really didn't expect that Zeke Klein was actually just Jalal's body of remembrance. A body of remembrance that only inherited half of his mana was able to obtain the title of one of the 10 saints. That Jalal really isn't simple. At this point, Makarov looked at Noah with gratification. To be able to defeat Jalal, your growth is greater than I imagined. Perhaps you already have the strength to contend with Gildas. Hearing that, Elisha and the others turned their gazes to Noah. Looking at Noah's face that was more mature than before, their hearts were abnormally excited. Back then, the child who couldn't even learn magic and could only tremble in fear and train his mana control had finally grown to the level of the strongest archmage in fairy tale. Time really passed by very quickly. Even Mira and Lisanna exchanged glances and smiled at each other, faintly feeling somewhat proud of themselves. For Mira and Lisanna, praising Noah was even more delightful than praising themselves. Gildas, huh? Noah stretched out his hand and looked at it. After a while, he suddenly smiled, letting his palm blossom with a brilliant white light. That was the sign of shattering magic. Then, Noah tightly clenched his hand that was blossoming with brilliant white light, a look of confidence in his eyes. In order to thank him for teaching me this spell, when he returns, I'll let him see my growth. Hearing the confidence in Noah's words and feeling the powerful mana emanating from Noah's clenched hand, the surrounding companions felt their emotions being stirred up, their blood boiling. Even Makarov smiled faintly and closed his eyes in gratification. I've really gotten old. As he said that, Makarov seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He glanced at Noah and coughed, drawing everyone's attention. Oh, right. Recently, 2 new members joined our guild. Let me introduce them to you. Apart from Mira and Lisanna, everyone else was stunned when they heard that. Chapter 4:12. Although it could not be said that there were new members joining Fairy Tale every day, there would usually be new members every once in a while. For example, Lucy, it seemed that Naz had met her outside by chance and brought her back. From then on, she had joined the Fairy Tale. Generally speaking, when there were new members joining, other than Mira and Lisanna who were responsible for branding the guild's emblem, everyone else would slowly become familiar with them and would never have the habit of introducing them. However, looking at Makarov's serious attitude, it seemed that the new member joining this time was not an ordinary new member. Obviously, the other party's background was definitely not simple. Who could it be? Driven by such thoughts, everyone, including Noah, became curious. However, in the next second, Noah's eyes narrowed and he frowned. He slowly turned his head and looked behind him. Following Noah's gaze, Elisha, Naz, Gray, Lucy, and the others looked behind him. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were all stunned on the spot. They saw that under Makarov's instructions, 2 figures got up from the table at the side and walked in front of everyone. They were a man and a woman who were about the same age as Noah and the others. Among them, the man had long black hair that was slightly curled up like spikes. His ears, eyes, and nose were pierced with some iron nails. He wore a suit full of metallic quality, and on his left shoulder was a guild emblem with the words, Fairy Tale. The woman had short hair that did not reach her shoulders. Her eyes were blue, and she was also wearing a blue and white princess dress and rain boots. She even had a hat on her head. She looked quite cute. At this moment, the man and woman had different expressions. The man who looked like a bad girl was staring at Noah. His gaze was very sharp, and there were fluctuations in his emotions, but more importantly, there was a serious expression. The woman, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Not only did she look a little timid, she also looked at Noah with a frightened expression. It was as if she had encountered a terrifying monster. It even made people feel that she had a psychological shadow. Who? Naz, Gray, Lucy, and the others who had not seen this man and woman before were a little confused. Only Elisha frowned. She felt that this man and woman looked familiar, as if she had heard of them before. This was only natural. After all, as the man who was known as the strongest sorcerer in Phantom Lord, and the woman who was once one of the 4 elements in Phantom Lord, this man and woman were quite famous. Because of Noah, the people here had never personally met this man and woman. However, Elisha, who often wandered outside, had more or less heard the people outside discussing the appearance of this man and woman. It wasn't strange that she found them familiar. Only Noah's eyes gradually turned cold as he looked at the man who was staring at him and the woman who was looking at him in fear. "So it's you. Phantoms Gadgelu and Jubian." "What?" Lucy couldn't help but cover her mouth as she looked at Gadgelu and Jubian in disbelief. "They're phantoms, people? You dash." Gray also opened his eyes wide. He suddenly stepped forward, tensed up, and even clenched his fists. "Are you the ones who destroyed our guild? Iron Destruction Dragon Sorcerer, Gadgelu and Four Elements Jubian?" Alusha finally remembered the identity of these two people, and her pretty face sank. "The so-called newcomers, are you referring to you? Bastard!" Naz's veins even popped out on his forehead as he roared at Makarov. "They want to join our guild. Don't joke around." All of a sudden, the atmosphere of the entire scene became heavy. Ma. Lisanna quickly came out to smooth things over. "Everyone, calm down first." "Calm down, okay." Mira also reached out and pulled Noah, shaking her head at Noah. Needless to say, what she meant was obvious. This made Noah look at Mira and Lisanna with some surprise. Mira and Lisanna don't have any objections. Mira didn't know if she saw through Noah's thoughts, but she spoke softly. "This is the president's idea. Brother Noah." Lisanna also spoke. "Let's hear what the president has to say first." You don't have to have such a big reaction. I chose to come to fairy tale myself." Gadgelu sneered, but there was no smile in his eyes as he still stared at Noah. He even reached out and touched his chest. "You gave me such a big gift and then disappeared. Aren't you too unreasonable?" Hearing this, Noah raised his eyebrows. In other words, Gadgelu was planning to seek revenge. That. Julibian came with Mr. Gadgelu. Julibian glanced at Noah with fear and said uneasily, "Our guild has been disbanded, and we have nowhere to go." This sentence made the anger in the hearts of Alusha, Naz, Gray, Lucy, and the others dissipate a lot. Now that the council had been disbanded, the outside world was in turmoil. Many guilds and even cities couldn't take care of themselves. It wasn't a good time to live peacefully. And as the former high mages of Phantom Lord, Gadgelu and Julibian's situation was definitely worse. It couldn't be helped. The atmosphere of Phantom Lord made them offend too many people. After Joseph's death, many branches were attacked by the Dark Guilds, causing them to be forced to disband. Now that a large number of dark guilds and magic orders were taking the opportunity to emerge, as the high mages of Phantom Lord, it was very likely that these dark guilds would find trouble with them. It was unlikely that they could stay still. Under such circumstances, presumably, even if Gadgelu and Julibian wanted to join other guilds, they wouldn't dare to accept these two if they didn't have the confidence to shock those small guilds. So, Gadgelu and Julibian chose to join Fairy Tale, right? Well, that's how it is, Makarov said calmly. Although they were enemies in the past, it was only hostility. Phantom has been disbanded, and they are excellent high mages. We have no reason to refuse them joining. Don't joke around. Naz was the first to stand up and shouted at Makarov. They're the ones who destroyed our guild. He. Hearing Naz's words, Gadgelu laughed strangely. Didn't your guild destroy our guild as well? This sentence made Alusha and the others speechless. Noah looked straight at Gadgelu and Julibian, and then at Gadgelu, who was looking at him without showing any weakness, and Julibian, who was full of fear. After a while, he shrugged. Forget it. You guys are right. They destroyed our guild, and I destroyed their guild as well. I even killed that disgusting bastard, Joseph. No matter how you look at it, we didn't suffer any losses. It doesn't matter if we call it even. After saying that, Noah glanced at Gadgilo and Jalibian. But let me make it clear first. If you just want to find a place to work or a place to stay, it doesn't matter. But if you join Fairy Tale for other purposes, I believe you understand that I will have a way to make you regret it. Gadgilo and Jalibian felt a chill in their hearts at the same time. One clenched his teeth and stared at Noah unwillingly, while the other nodded repeatedly and almost swore. Seeing this, Ilusa and the others understood what was going on. Although their expressions were different, Gadgilo and Jalibian were full of fear of Noah. What did Noah do to this man and woman to make them so afraid of him? Ilusha and the others naturally didn't know that, not to mention Gadgilo and Jalibian, even the rest of the Phantom High Mages were completely afraid of Noah after the one-sided and overwhelming battle last time. After all, Noah's strength was too terrifying, and they couldn't help but fear him. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.